Welcome to the Late Night with Chalky podcast.
And so 5,
4. Friends and family, brothers and sisters, welcome to the Late Night with Chalky podcast.
Woo! Our guest this week, entrepreneur with a creative mind. One hell of a creative mind over here.
Dude.
And he's also an industry powerhouse with over 20 years of experience. His resume includes VP of Operations at Paul Frank, President, and then again, Global General Manager at RVCA, a couple different times there. SVP, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at Igloo, and is currently the Global GM at Quiksilver. But his talents don't stop there. He also co-founded and sold 2 companies. C-Preme, which made Raskullz helmets and some other cool products. Those are kids' helmets, which was acquired by BRG Sports, which is Bell, the biggest freaking helmet company in the world. Woo! And then started another company, Land and Sea Recreation, which produced Yew Stuff, which was environmentally sensible coolers that was acquired by Igloo, another freaking powerhouse. He's held various roles and positions in business, which made him invaluable. And we know he definitely has a few new business ideas cooking in that creative brain over there. And we're stoked to hear his story. We welcome our friend Brizz Blankinship.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm
Brizz.
Stoked to be here.
Dude,
Brizz.
as you were going down the long list of accomplishments,
Yeah.
and earlier we were talking about, like, who the fuck is Brad Blankinship? Who the fuck is, why are you guys going to interview this guy no one's even heard of, Brad Blankinship?
I have.
And
Grew up with this mofo over here.
Yeah, which is really freaking amazingly interesting that, you know, somebody like Brad, who is one of the Huntington Beach locals.
Yeah, definitely.
But, dude, is it president of Quiksilver?
I'm technically the global general manager is the title they call my role, but yeah, it's basically a president job.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for being here, Mr. President.
but before we get into it, for sure, we talk about like the surf talent and how richly cultured like Huntington is, and how many great surfers it produced. But on the flip side, like how many business and entrepreneurs and people that have grown up here. One, because it's in the the ground zero and the mecca of like the industry, but like so many successful.
We're lucky that
businessmen that come out here.
Yeah, we're lucky that we get to sit down with people like you, and you guys kind of tell us how it's done. Like how you did it, and hopefully this inspires the kids of the future. Because, dude, I mean okay, let's just get into it.
Well, we know you're HB Loke.
Yeah, born and raised here in HB. Been in HB pretty much all my life. Had maybe a 6-month stint in Costa Mesa, but found my way back here.
6 months.
Not long. So went to Dwyer and to Huntington High, and always surfed. Would say was never a good surfer, and had a lot of good surfers around me. But yeah, to your point, I think Huntington Beach or Orange County just fosters a ton of creative people, and a lot of amazing brands have come out of here, and I think it's just a really inspiring environment to be in. So
yeah,
I've always loved Huntington Beach and loved being around this area.
How did you find surfing?
I think I don't know how. I remember kind of the first cover of a magazine was the one with Martin Potter doing an air on the board that had the Saint graphic, and it was just kind of like, whoa, this is cool. So I started surfing kind of like in 4th grade, and I went to Newland School. The guy at my school who was the incredible surfer we could talk the entire podcast about was CC. So CC and I were friends, and he surfed in my division, even though he's probably 5 years older than me. But so then
we heard about that.
Yeah, I went to Dwyer and just hung out with all kinds of guys that were incredible surfers. I was really good friends with Barry and Jeff Deffenbaugh, and still today, good friends with those guys, friends with like Jason Russo, and I think like all those guys are so much better than me, but was lucky to just hang out with like a lot of amazing surfers that helped me surf every day, even though I was a chubby nerdy kid from a little bit more inland in Huntington. Those guys were always cool to me and took me under their wing. So I just always loved surfing from the kind of day I started it.
Do your parents still own the house?
My parents still live in the house I grew up in. A lot of people have had one of my parents as their principals. My mom was a principal at Newland School and then Talbot School. My dad was the vice principal at Edison. So
wow.
A lot of people in this area know my mom or dad because they were principals. So I think that was good and bad for me. I couldn't get.
There's not too many Blankenships, but we know a couple of important ones.
Yeah.
They run the school system.
I couldn't get away with much. I was not a good student, and
with 2 principals, how could you get away with anything?
if
You have siblings?
I have a older sister who, oddly, she's a principal too. So, what
What happened to you, dude?
I was
Thank God.
I was going down that path and thought that's what I wanted to do. Maybe shape surfboards in the summer and then teach, and just stumbled across something else and just didn't do it. But I went to school and did my student teaching and thought I was going to go down that route, and then just made a pivot because I stumbled into something else.
Yeah. Well, going back to you at Dwyer, what do you remember the boards you were riding and what wetsuits you were wearing?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of boards from Asaku, like A39s in junior high and high school. Got a lot of hand-me-down boards from CC, which was kind of cool. Bought some boards from Ryan Keenan too. Ryan was a bigger guy, and I'd always hit him up if he had boards. But no, I think through all junior high and high school, I rode either Classics, if you guys remember those, and A39s.
Gene the best.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah.
You're old.
Yeah.
We're both old. Yeah.
But there was a ton of incredible shapers in this area and stuff. I rode Asaku's for quite a few years, and man, is
CC was a big Asaku team rider for a while there too.
Yeah, I grew up off of, if you know Huntington, I grew up off of like Newland and Adams, so I hung out at the surf, which was
surf too?
Yeah, I was there that was my after school hangout, was going to the surf. So, there's a lot of good guys, like Tim Brandon and the Voorhees brothers, and just there's always good kids coming through that shop. So just got some boards from there and stuff. But I would say I was more of like the surf kid than I was a downtown Huntington kid.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny we D-Bob brought up the surf and how much of an impact that Keto had in the community with the local Groms, but also the importance of his role in Tom Curran's life too.
The mentorship, and then Japanese are always just so forward thinking. Had probably the state of the art camera. He knew he was a little.
It's so funny.
I got lots of good Keto stories, but I'll give you one. I always heard that Keto had a ton of boards that he just put in a container somewhere, and so I always bugged his wife Amy and just say, hey, I know Keto's got those boards. If you ever want to sell them, I'd love to, and see what he's got. And one day, out of the blue persistence, she called me and said, hey, we want to sell off these boards, so meet me here. And man, I got some good boards. And
really?
a couple of
Current style.
I got two of Tom's personal boards. One hangs in my living room.
Wow.
I met him later, and he signed it and told me the story of that board, and it buckled, and he just kind of left it. He left it in Hawaii, and Keto brought it back. So I've always tried to stay friendly with Keto, just if I run into him. But just a guy like HB legend, Keto. Keto's the guy. Tom Curran stayed at his house, and I think he was a huge part of Barry and Jeff's success, helping those guys out. So he was a cool guy.
I gotta make fun of J-Lar, but so Amy works at Three Monkeys, sushi bar over here, right? And the day after we interviewed D-Ba, it was fresh in my mind, and she happened to be working the day after, and I was telling her, hey, we really want to interview, you and Keto, and talk about the surf, because you guys have come up in a bunch of different podcasts and we'd love to have you guys on. And I go, yeah, Jay Larson used to ride for you guys. And she's like, no, he didn't. she goes, it was too late for him to get on. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. I go, he didn't ride for you? And she's like, I don't think so.
Really? I got a board to prove it. You can't get lambs without being a team rider. It's not a sticker. No, I'm just kidding.
I remember Jay with the surf.
Yeah, I rode for them in Timponi for, I don't know, it was like a year or two.
Yeah, Timponi gave Jeff a car we called it the La Bamba car.
Oh, I remember that.
It was pretty
Timponi gave Deba a car?
When Timponi moved to Maui, he gave his car to Jeff, and it was like this huge, like, 2-door sedan, but still long, and you could put your boards in the trunk.
Yeah,
it was that big, which was pretty funny. Good times.
So, did you try to be in like contests with the boys, or?
Oh yeah, I was in contests all the time, and I was in the novice division, and was never that good. Like I loved it, and I think maybe the last contest I did. Nea Post beat me, and I said, maybe I'll start doing some graphic design.
She'd be a lot of dudes.
Yeah,
she ripped.
She would be a lot of dudes.
She did rip, but Andy Verdone, when I've gone and talked to the surf class a couple times, and both times he introduced me as like, hey, Brad's a guy that knew when to put the surfboard in the rafters, and so and so. I did some contests and maybe got a 6th place in a novice division here and there, but that was about the extent of it.
Yeah. So you knew that a professional career in surfing wasn't.
Oh, for sure. No.
Yeah.
Like it's funny now. Like what I do at Quiksilver, it's incredible, and the amount of like parents that want to get their kids sponsored, and like if you're not already getting boards by the time you're in 7th grade, it's like you gotta be real about.
Yeah, there's only a handful of guys that if you're past the age of 13 and you're not like totally ripping, it's too late.
Yeah, I remember like to this day, the first day I saw Jay surfing the pier, and it blew me away. Like we were on.
Hear that?
Yeah, it did. It was, you were young, but it was. I remember there was some swell, and it was on north side, and I saw Jay catch the sway, and I'm like, oh my God, who's this guy now? Like I've already got it tough enough. I'm like got Cece and Barry and Jeff. Yeah. Jason Russo was incredible in his day, and guys like Kurt and Lloyd Tice, and then Jay coming up. I'm just like, I think maybe I should get a video camera or something.
Yeah, you were 3 grades older. When did you graduate?
I was a senior when you were a freshman.
Okay, yeah. Like with Barry.
Yeah.
So trying to remember, because it was like back then it was like we all hung out, but I don't remember what grades everybody was in.
Yeah.
Didn't really matter back then, but
yeah. So as you're in high school and your parents are principals, that was the path you were going. You were gonna maybe become a school teacher.
I'd say I was really a terrible student, and like so bad that like sometimes I wouldn't even check books out or didn't have a locker in high school. Never did homework. I was really, really just awful in school. And so after graduating high school, I went to OCC, and I tell people like sometimes people just click at a different age. Sometimes like my son, I'm so lucky. He's getting honor roll, and he reads and loves doing homework. For me, I remember like my 3rd week at OCC, just all of a sudden thinking like, oh man, like I need to get my shit together, because this is not
really took to college.
This isn't good.
You know why? Because you're paying for it. You're paying for these classes. You have more better things to do than to sit in this class. So you might as well.
City college is pretty cheap though, right?
I think I was cheap.
But it's your money. It's not. Yeah. It's not going to high school.
For me, it was just like it just clicked, and I thought like, man, I have to figure out something, because this is I put myself in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Like I'm struggling in junior college, and my friends are going on doing bigger things.
Going back, what was your first job?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I have had so many interesting jobs, and this is really weird, but my first job, I worked at the police station.
Oh,
and
shit.
they,
What age?
young, like 16 years old. This is incredible. Like, but
Police station on Main? Or
yeah, on Main. This
Main.
is incredible. Like, I'll say this, people wouldn't even believe that they allowed me to do this. But I washed the cars, but I didn't physically wash the cars.
You drove
I
them.
drove them
To
at
car
16
washes.
years old to the car wash, got them washed, came back, put new flares in the cars, whatever. I remember the only time I ever took advantage, I was following Cabbage, and I'm just like, oh, this is too good. And
Turn on the
laid
lights.
on the horn, and he was so scared, he pulled over and drove by him. But that was my first
Joe
time.
by with the middle finger.
Totally, yeah. I still, and he was Cabbage was small, so like he looked like just a 13-year-old kid driving a car, anyways. But then I worked for the city for a
So
while.
wait, how did you get that job?
Oh,
Because that sounds like a kind of like
I
difficult
vaguely
job to
remember
get.
like you driving the cars, but I do remember you running the city gym because that was our boys club. That was our hangout.
the city gym came next. I was doing
Well, tell us how you got that cop job first.
I heard about it. My mom, being in education, she helped a lot of things with the city. She told me they had this program for kids that wanted to later be police officers, whatever. And I'm like, wow, that sounds kind of cool. Go do that. When I quit is you do this kind of student worker plan, and then they put you in as a cadet. And the cadets, like, you go on ride-alongs. And I remember like going on a ride-along, and we went to break up a party. I'm like, oh, I'm out. Like, I'm not. And
I want to be seen in a cop car.
in Huntington.
You
like,
nerd!
Fifth and Orange.
Yeah, fucking narc.
Totally.
Get a tissue, nerd.
Yeah, totally. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And that's when I went and worked at the city gym. And the city gym was a good run. If you're like a single kid with a key to the city gym, like there was a lot of benefits that came with having a key to that gym for 10 years. That's pretty good.
I mean, the location, it was right at our junior high
There was
school
a
area.
pool.
Everyone went there.
That was our clubhouse as a kid. I mean, pool, full basketball court,
Ping pong
ping
table.
pong, foosball, like 3 pool tables.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it was a spot.
It was, I mean, the greatest job ever for someone going through college.
What,
It was
what,
just
would you, what were your
incredible.
duties there?
I mean, you're basically like signing up people for activities like swim lessons or volleyball or whatever, but you're kind of just hanging.
Just hanging.
Like I joke and say, well, I'm a professional ping pong player because you're playing ping pong the whole time or doing homework, or like I said, I have the keys. So a lot of times, like I would call guys and play basketball after. Then Huntington, some incredible basketball players. Like we'd play, man. There's like this 5-year stretch where like me, Casey Wee, Sam August, Byron. Like we had such a good crew of dudes in there every night playing
was
basketball.
serious.
Oh, some guys that really like were incredible basketball.
Yeah.
Like Casey, amongst being good at a lot of stuff, Casey was a
Great basketball.
solid basketball player.
Yeah.
But we had
Strong, noodly.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a good time and having that.
Kevin Garnett.
But the pickup games were like you would have to, have a team. You challenge teams. Like it was a full busy court where you had to show up, and if you couldn't beat the team holding court, then you're back out and going in rotation, or lucky enough to jump in.
Yeah, you have to go back to the foosball table if you couldn't hang. So yeah, I played a ton of basketball with those guys. So it was a fun job, super fun job.
Speaking of city gym, I wonder if kids still go to that.
I hope so. I mean,
Because what an incredible place, that promotes exercise and all that.
Well,
What a gathering place for free.
and it was K through 8th was the city gym leagues, and there would be a basketball season and there would be a flag football before Friday Night Lights and before it got like kind of what it is today.
Yeah.
But it's like, you go sign up for basketball. I have, every year, it would be two grade combinations.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
I remember going there and swimming and playing ping pong with you probably. Right? And it was like, wow, this place is cool.
Yeah, there's always rumors about there being a tunnel from Dwyer to the city gym. There's not.
We try to find it.
But you can actually, this is really
Walk around the pool underneath.
Underneath the pool, you can walk
all the way
around.
around.
It's pretty crazy, yeah. Huh. And the gym there, I think in the old days, like that gym is on springs. you know, so it has some kind of bounce to it. So it actually is pretty good. Like, it doesn't give you shin splints, and it's a really cool facility.
Yeah.
So you graduate high school, you're going to OCC, and your mindset is to become a teacher.
Yeah, I thought like, well, you know, I'm gonna learn how to shape surfboards and be a teacher, and that was kind of my game plan. Like that, I thought, well, yeah, that could
That's a
be
kind of
good
cool
life.
game plan.
Yeah.
Like what got you into shaping? You were just fascinated on like, you know, did you go into shaping bays with Asaku or anybody else? And
all the time, and you know, hung out with Mark Nakashima, and just kind of was the kid that like lurked around the glass shop and all that. So where this is weird, but Judah Mailer, like we stole all the wood from construction sites and everything and built a shaping room in his garage and shaped a few boards out of there with Judah and got really, really kind of into it. And my, you know, again,
I think you had one at your house.
I did. Yeah. So I was a terrible, terrible student, like I said. And my dad said, hey, look, you know, what if you want to do this, and we'll help you make a shaping room in our garage. And, you know, he's like, we'll do it completely legit if you stay in college and keep, you know, let me help you with this. Which was really cool. My dad, like now, my dad is in his 80s. So I'm lucky. I have awesome parents. But my dad always said, hey, my agenda in making that shaping room was to keep an eye on you, you know, like to keep you here. I knew you and your friends would be here messing with surfboards and stuff. So, you know, and the shaping room, it's still there. Like,
no way.
How rad.
I remember
you guys send me pictures of that.
You shaped me a board, and I remember
Shut up.
Yeah, I remember going and picking it up, and I'm like, yeah, he had a full shaping bay.
Did you have a name for it?
It was my last name, Blankinship Surfboards. But, you know, I shaped for a handful of good guys. Like, I shaped for a few boards for Brett Schwartz. I shaped a couple boards for Barry. I'll take credit for getting Barry into shaping because he came over and hung out in my room. I was devastated. I made Jay a board. And when you're a kid, like working on the city gym salary, I think I was making like $5.75 an hour. So if I gave a guy a board, like that was my money.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I gave Jay a board and he wrote it, and I kept wanting to get feedback, and I asked Jay, like, how'd it go? Like, so exciting. And he goes, yeah, it didn't really work that good. I'm like, oh my God, like just so bummed.
And it's hard because you truly do want, like, you'd be stoked if you got a good board, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, oh, killer freaking piece of, like, I wasn't expecting it to be bad. I just was hoping it was going to be good. But
no, it's cool. It's cool though. Like, I think, you know, was a great experience. I got to shape, you know, a handful of boards for good guys. I'd say it, you know, I'm a terrible shaper. What I liked about making surfboards was the marketing side of it, and like
creating a brand,
totally,
like a logo.
Yeah, making t-shirts. I had probably more fun trying to make my own t-shirts and hats and things like that. You know, at some point I leaned a ton on like Barry Vandermeulen and Jensen. Like those guys really, like, I'd mess up an outline or something and go walk over to Jensen and go, man, could you please bail me out on this? I think I just screwed up this blank. So Jensen and Barry Vandermeulen were always like really good guys and kind to me and would help me. But, you know, I think what I liked about making surfboards was really just understanding the industry and marketing. You know, and that really was cool.
How freaking
what a trip.
Yeah. Had more fun making t-shirts and graphics, which is, I mean, you're brand building it back then.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're having fun. You're just getting you know.
Totally. You know, or just, I think, I don't know, seeing some, still this day, if I see someone like, you know, even a Ruka shirt, like I go, oh, wow, I had something to do with that. Like it's just cool having a brand out there that you see it and you're like, oh, I'm involved in that. You know, I was involved in doing that.
Yeah.
So that part really I enjoy it.
So how long did you shape for?
I shaped on and off for years. Like I want to say I still do occasionally, but not really. Like now if I do a board, I'll get a blank that's been shaped off the machine, but I really like dig it. I think a lot about, you know, what I'll do later in life. That's what if I could do anything, that's what I'd do.
How funny.
Hang out and make surfboards in my garage would be really fun. But yeah, I found out at some point, like, man, I'm not really good at this. You know, I'm good at the marketing side. Maybe I could do something because, you know, I had all kinds of like, you know, even though I was a shitty shaper, to be honest, like I convinced good guys to try the boards. Like Jay tried one, I had Barry trying them. I had like,
did CC ride one?
Yeah, a little bit. Justin Harcharik, like if you remember. And
Yeah.
So I had a handful of good guys that were trying him. So, I did boards on and off here and there for a while, years.
So after City Gym and going to college, what was your next career step?
Yeah, so I knew Paul Frank and the guys that were starting Paul Frank, and I knew Paul of this like just interesting dude. Do you guys remember? You remember Amy's Bakery?
Yeah.
Like now where Java Point is.
Yeah.
So Paul worked at the newsstand next to Amy's Bakery, and he was just this interesting dude and that played the guitar and kind of weird, but I was always drawn to the guy. Like, there's something cool about this dude, And so he was making wallets and things for his friends out of like scrap Naugahyde material. And Ryan Hauser had worked at Mossimo, and we were buddies at the time. And Ryan and him started getting this little company started in the garage. And I always was hanging out at that house where Paul was like sewing in the garage. And it's interesting. I remember I was interviewing for jobs, and because I worked at the city, I applied for this job with the city of Beverly Hills. And these city jobs are crazy. Like, no kidding, like 500 people applied for this job. And they called me, and I was helping Paul, and Paul and Ryan were paying me like nothing, and
What were you doing like for him?
a little of everything, like boxing orders, running errands to the vendors that were making it, like it was early days. Like we didn't have email at the time. Like you'd get an order off a fax machine. So, I applied for this job. There was like 500 people, and I got the job, and for the city of Beverly Hills. And I remember like I went over and talked to my dad. I'm like, God, I got this job. It was $60,000 was the salary. Whew. And at that time,
pretty big.
Yeah, at that time, this is like.
But did you know the commute to Beverly Hills every day?
No, I was
out there.
I was like going to move up there and
Wow.
the whole deal. Just like, oh my God, this is great. I got this job.
Were you graduated already from college?
I ended up graduating from Cal State Fullerton. It took me a while. Again, not being a good student. It's 3 years at OCC, a couple years at Cal State Fullerton, got my degree, and then, started applying for city jobs and student teaching and stuff. Was, still making boards and just tinkering. So, I was helping Paul and Ryan do these bags and stuff. So I remember I got this job.
Can we stop real quick?
Sure.
Though? And kind of, because Paul Frank has been out of the picture for a while, but Paul Frank was like a multi-million-dollar business. It became, but it started from like you already said it, like little leather pouches and fucking purses.
Again, another guy, not a surfer, but another guy that came out of Huntington that started a company that was north of 40 million revenue, and really, really. I mean, for a minute there, Paul was like a pop culture icon.
He was like mid-century modern of the present time.
Yeah,
I mean, catchy logo, the monkey, and
Julius, right?
Julius, and I still talk to Paul all the time,
but they were starting up, and you're kind of just doing odd-in help there.
I think HSS was one of the first people to carry.
HSS carried it.
Yeah.
So I didn't take. Long story short, I didn't take that job with the city. Talked to my dad. I'm like, there's just something special about this Paul Frank brand. And you know what? I like the idea of making things, and like this is really. And my dad, it's like, hey, if you want to move back in, like, and take your chances on this job and see, like, he's all, we'll support you. Do what you want to do. Like, dude, if that's something you would want to do. So, no kidding, guys. I moved back in with my mom and dad. Sold my car because it was literally like. I was literally like when I started Paul Frank making $6 an hour. So sold my car, moved back in. John and Ryan, the two other owners, let me drive the company van. Like I literally drove the van. It was humbling because all my other friends have apartments. They got girls coming over.
You're living
everything. Yeah, I'm like living with my mom and dad. But oh my God, it was such a smart decision. And one thing I tell kids now is like, hey, if you have a chance coming out of college, go to the small company. And don't go work in a cubicle in some giant company where the owners don't even know your name, because what I learned at Paul Frank, what was invaluable in that, I learned a little of everything, because there's only a few of us there, like Jay Acuna, another Huntington guy, but it was like me, Jay Acuna, the owners, and, it grew from, 3, 4, 5 of us to over 100 people, and we actually, when on the tail end of my stint there, we had the RVCA building, which is how we ended up getting that for RVCA later. So it was an incredible run, and man, I learned so much.
Because you were at the very beginning
Yeah.
of Paul Frank.
Yeah.
And if we kind of gave the rundown of Paul Frank, it was like weird monkey, cartoon, but killer like t-shirts, and it became a clothing brand, and you started making bikes that had their own stores. Like,
Well, it was
got to be
like,
gigantic.
yeah, but it was it kind of fell within the kids market, the women's and the men, as like an accessory brand that it played in a lot of different lanes, and I think they had success, and a lot of them, it just kept exploding. Like, what else can we put this logo and monkey on? And it went to
the thing.
Lights.
There's a ton I learned from the
Furniture.
experience, but one of the big things about Paul Frank that I still think about a lot today is I call it finding the seams or finding white space opportunity. And Paul Frank, we were able to do that because we're naive. Like, you work at a big giant company, and they'll tell you, oh, you can't do this or you can't do this.
Yeah.
What
ROI on that? Do you know how much investment in the company and how many people would have to hire to start that division? Like,
Totally.
it would just go down the route where it would say there's too many no's, where
Totally.
you guys are like, well, let's give it a shot.
So huge, and there's other brands that have done a ton of it today, but at the time, like, no one sold pajamas in Huntington Surf and Sport, So I mean, we sold millions of pairs of pajamas, and it was just, again, a white space or a seam where no one else was doing it, and we snuck in and did it. And 2 years later, everyone was making, Roxy and every other brand was making pajamas, but we had a few categories like that where we just snuck in and did it. The other thing, like, people don't remember about Paul Frank is we are really early in collaborations. Like, we did a huge collab with Shepherd Ferry, where that was before Obey, and I think he ended up saying, well, maybe I go and start my own company because of this, because it was really successful. We did collaborations with Mark Ryden, Thomas Campbell, but then that all went well, so we started doing John Deere and Barbie and all kinds. So Paul Frank was a company that was really ahead of its time in doing, like, out of the box things, like cross brand collabs for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because that's probably where you accumulated most of your business acumen, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think still today, like, I laugh about, and a lot of, just like Huntington, a lot of really successful people came out of Paul Frank, but everything I still do today is what I learned way back at Paul Frank, where it's implementing a, operating system, or just how we think about, dealing with customers. It's all stuff that I learned from that experience.
Yeah.
Who was in the think tank of, like, coming up with these products and, like, growing the business with you guys? Like, so Paul was a creative.
Yeah, Paul was just, he
The name, the face, the creative.
Paul was an interesting guy. He taught himself how to sew. He's an incredible guitar player. He just made my son this most insane guitar strap for Christmas, and
That's
it's a guy that could just, and he did it dumpster diving, and he went to an auto upholstery place and found, like, scrap, what they call Naugahyde.
Yeah.
And so that's how he started, just with scrap Naugahyde, making wallets and stuff. So Paul was huge in that. There's a guy who's now, my brother-in-law, and we've done a lot of business together, named Ben Soto. And Ben was a huge part of it. Just, it's funny, like, Paul met Ben because Ben was the guy who drew the signboards at Trader Joe's.
Wow.
And Paul's like, oh, whoever's drawing these pictures, who does this?
That's how they met?
Yeah. And so that
How funny.
Paul had Ben come in. Paul was incredibly talented, but he couldn't use a computer. He hand drew stuff with a Xerox machine at the time. So Ben came in and did, like, things on Illustrator and could really bring Paul's ideas to life. So
that's cool.
But there's a handful of guys like Parker and Tyler Jacobs. Those guys did Yo Gabba Gabba. They were at Paul Frank early on.
No way.
Yeah.
The Yo Gabba Gabba guys came from Paul Frank?
Yeah, there's a guy, Parker Jacobs. So his brother, Christian Jacobs.
Worked at RVCA.
Yeah, Christian worked at RVCA. Small world.
Yeah.
Those guys were all, a big part of Yo Gabba Gabba.
Yeah.
Christian was actually the guy who created, but Parker and Tyler Jacobs were a big part of it. So yeah, lots of talented guys. I mean, even down to like, I don't know if you know the name. There's a designer at Paul Frank named Philip Lim who ended up moving on and being kind of a big time like couture designer.
Yeah.
So there's just a ton of really talented people that came out of that.
It's got to be like so amazing to be on the ground floor when you're working out of a garage, basically, right? And seeing it move into a warehouse, and then a bigger warehouse, and then you start like, you know, seeing magazines with Paul Frank in it, and like all the things that happen when the business grows, right?
That's the coolest. I think, you know, for me, I've done a lot of weird things. I've now started companies and sold them and worked at big companies, but that kind of being a part of a company in its infancy and growing with the company to like that 20, 25, $30 million level, it's the best thing ever. And I love to work. Probably my wife would say, hey, I don't have balance and I, you know, work way too much. But I love it. I love what I do. And, you know, working, like I worked my ass off, but because you like it. Like, you know, we at Paul Frank and Ruka the first time, like I was there, you know, we'd literally get to a point where you kind of have to encourage people to go home.
Yeah.
Like we'd be like, hey, it's 7:30, you know, like, you know, go spend some time with your family, just because it was work, but we just loved what we were doing.
Yeah.
You know?
So, and you get to see, like you said, like all aspects of the business, like, hey, you know, delegating, well, I'm going to, you know, like you're kind of involved in all these different departments. Like you said, if you're going to a big company, you're just kind of pigeonholed into kind of like one portion of what makes that company go around.
Totally. You're just stuck in a cubicle and just where, you know, if you get involved in companies in their infancy, then you have the opportunity to get your hands on everything.
And you interned probably for like 10 different jobs, but you know, because you're wearing 10 different hats at the beginning.
Yeah. So what was your like expertise and what was your role
at Paul Frank? It was weird because I did a little bit of everything, and you know, my title at the end was Vice President of Operations. So if you think of operations, it's, you know, supply chain and shipping the product and logistics, but you know, I did a lot of everything, you know, and like a lot of the collab ideas I came up with, or, you know, it was just cool because I got to get my hands on every part of the business and learn a ton. So, you know, after that, you know, I've never really done like a pure operations job again, but I know it, you know, I know the fundamentals of it, which has helped me a ton in my career.
Yeah.
You know, understanding like, well, you know, how do you ship product? How do you do it commercial invoice or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
You know, I learned that all at that first gig.
But what's fascinating about like Paul Frank is most brands come out with like, hey, we're going to be in this category, or we're going to do this, or maybe a play. Like they came out as an accessory brand,
right?
And
accessory little brand,
and then and the next thing you know, it's like, hey, it's got to have printable, you got to have apparel to kind of help support and market.
Yeah.
And then it was like, dude, they're fucking doing pillows, and then they're freaking doing bikes, and then
bikes.
they're doing like, you know, I don't even
cartoon
like furniture and stuff at one point.
Yeah, a little of everything. It was it's just so, again, because looking back, because we're naive and really didn't know, you know, like, well, why can't we go do this, you know? So, but to me, that it was magic. It was like, man, in trying stuff, we'd have one thing about every year where we try something and, you know, most of it, you know, luckily hit. Like those pajamas, like who would have known, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of stuff along the run that worked and a handful of things that certainly didn't work. But,
what year?
You gotta try new stuff.
Early 2000, like, or late 90s? Or
I started there in 1998 and was there up until 2006 or 7.
So, like, when you guys say, let's start doing pajamas, like, what was, you know, like, we all know what the supply chain is and our, you know, what we have to deal with in our businesses now. Like, taking a gamble back then, it's like, okay, well, you know, what's the minute, you know, were you buying like 1,000, a couple thousand getting pre-books? Because, you know, starting a new category, it's like, well, how much risk are we going to take?
So different back then because, you know, we still did a lot of domestic production.
Yeah.
So like those accessories initially, I'm smiling because I'm still friends with all these people. Like we had a contractor in Santa Ana that sewed all the wallets. We had a lady named Karen in Santa Ana who helped us do all the pajamas initially. So it wasn't like it is today where you're making stuff in Shenzhen, China, or India or whatever. You'd work with a local supplier that they would make you 200 of something. You know, it wasn't like, oh my God, we got to buy 5,000 units of this. So, you know, it started back then with domestic manufacturing, and then as we grew, we took things overseas where it made sense.
But it gave you a chance to be a little more nimble and try stuff without taking like huge.
You know what
risk.
Part of it did too is like it was different back then doing domestic production because you had to learn about actually making a garment. Like there's so many people today that they go to FITM and learn how to do Illustrator, and then they're sending a tech pack to China. Like we were making product. We were taking fabric to the cutter and getting it cut and driving it to a different person to sew it. You know, like so
you're making your own samples pretty much, right?
Yeah, in a sample room in the building, which none of that really exists today in action sports specialty apparel anymore.
Yeah.
But back then, it taught you a ton because you had to understand like waste. Like, okay, well, how do we cut as many pieces out of this, fabric and not waste it? So it was good because we learned a lot, but so different than today. Hopefully, I think some things will start coming back with COVID and people understanding like, gosh, don't have all your eggs in one basket in supply. Like diversify and have some stuff back here. So you're seeing some of that come back now, but it was so different back then where you just didn't put everything in China.
Because I mean, you guys, the brand was fucking on
huge.
fire.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and it takes a
non-surf brand.
Yeah.
In our market, in HSS,
it was massive.
It was a big.
What was crazy is like
deal.
we started in a little building in Costa Mesa, and then Volca moved out of the 1537 Monrovia building, which today is Toes on the Nets.
Yeah.
So Volca moved out of that building into the building they're in now, which was Quiksilver.
Yeah.
If you remember.
Yeah.
So Volca moved down the street to the Quiksilver building. We moved in the Volca building. But no one, even though we were selling surf and sport and all the action sport apparel accounts, none of those guys saw us as a threat or a competitor. Like all the reps from Roxy would come in and hang, and we had friends from Volcom, or I'd call this lady Ann Fong, who was an incredible mentor, and she was a controller at Volcom. She'd answer questions because we weren't surfing, we weren't sponsoring guys. No one really saw us as a threat. And then boom, all of a sudden we're 40 million revenue.
Yeah.
But it was cool because we had like this kind of cool friendship, and ended up pulling a lot of employees in from Quick, a lot of employees in from Volcom. But the slogan of the company was "Paul Frank is your friend," and I think people just looked at us like, "Oh, these guys are cool. They're they're not trying to steal our athletes. It's just kind of cool."
Yeah, it's listening to you talk about it and remembering what it was and for the market. It was like totally different, totally non-surf, but just novelty. Like one of the first novelty brands to come into our space. But it was like a lot of different categories.
But it was successful here, but Japan and other areas really embraced it, right?
How long do you think it took you guys to get to 40 mil?
9 years, yeah. But it was there's all these milestones, and I think like every company kind of has these. I think the first big number was 5 million, like going out of the garage, getting a building, getting to 5 million revenue. I remember like we never thought we'd ever get to 5 million. Like we talked joking, like, oh my God, could you imagine if somehow we were able to grow a $5 million brand? And we flew by that. So I think there's a lot of brands that get to that $10 million mark, and you either, have to make some tough decisions and change the way you're doing things to make that jump to kind of 20, 30 million.
Yeah.
And a lot of brands don't. A lot of brands kind of hover around that 10 million or less forever. And then there's a handful of these, I'm talking about our industry.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of brands that are able to make the jump, So,
yeah. It's a, we could talk about that side of the business on the investment side when you get to that. I mean, you're more of a national brand, and then building out, displays to get off a fixture. You know, you want growth. You know, like there's all of that kind of
But it
other
was
cash flow that's needed
Totally,
to get to
yeah.
that next.
you
jump.
guys were privately held for a long time, right? Like you didn't.
Oh, back then, yeah, it was all the owners had 100% of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what was the onus of you making a move to? What was your next move?
Yeah, I think that there was a point where things weren't working out with the owners, and I think Paul had a very different vision of what he wanted to do compared to the other two owners, and Paul basically left the company, you know, or was asked to leave the company. Well, no, I'd have to go back and remember exactly how that happened, not on the podcast. But so Paul left the company, and I started thinking like, oh no, you know, like what does this mean for me? And so Massimo came into the company, and I kind of had that like, oh shit moment of like, this is going to look different in the future. And I had a friend named Robbie Kegel who was making surfboards called Cream, like, and there's just something about this kid. I'm like, man, he's just doing something different, you know. And Alex Knoss was riding his boards, and I was just like really admired this kid and what he was doing. So I started helping him a lot. We did, you know, it was weird. We did a couple art shows with boards, and it started kind of one of those immediately going well, and we became sure.
Is he kind of like Robbie Kegel? Is kind of was at the forefront of the mid-length / alternative hipster.
I think, yeah, I mean,
hipster style boards.
Robbie's just a super interesting guy, and you know, he would hate if I said the word retro, or you know, he's like, no, what I'm doing is totally progressive, and it's about performance. Like I'm pushing something different, and that's how he thought of it. But he, you know, he was a incredible surfer and still is, and made longboards. So I got involved with Robbie. We ended up having to switch the name from Cream to Gato Heroi. And in doing this...
And who came up with Gato Heroi?
It was Robbie, yeah. You know, I was on that. He was a creative genius and, you know, just doing something totally different than anyone else was doing at the time. And, you know, I got involved and just started kind of gaining momentum. And long story short, the... two Paul Frank owners let me go, you know, and for years because you know I started this side company, and you know, I think it was you know, I was spending my daytime at Paul Frank, but you know, burning my midnight oil on this thing that I thought
passion project.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to build this thing and kind of jump into it. So you know, it's in hindsight, there's probably things I would have done different. Maybe the owners would have looked at it different. I'm still really close friends with Paul. We talk, gosh, at least a few times a week. And same with John Oswald, who's the owner of the company. And still, you know, John and I are really close. Ryan and I don't talk, but you know, I was for years it bummed me out, and like I had a lot of friends that worked there and lost some friends over it. And at the same time now, like you tell people like, hey, you know, serendipity or things happen for a reason, or you know, I wouldn't be where I am today without that happening.
Yeah.
You know, like I think like, man, what if I was there another 5 years and then what? So I was making these boards with Robbie and Pat Tenori. Pat and I were like, I remember it was weird, but way back when Jay was young, the Etchigoians like had this extra car, and they like had surf prescriptions. And Pat Tenori, I knew as one of the guys that was always part of this Etchigoian crew of like J-Lar and Casey Wheat and, you know, Craigie surfed incredible. But Pat kind of was like this interesting guy who I was always like kind of intrigued by this guy and I'd ask him to go out to lunch, and he's just charismatic and tons of energy. But when I was at Paul Frank, we were kind of competitors because we're down the street from each other.
So Ruka was already out.
Yeah, at this time, Ruka's like, you know, just on 16th Street, just in its absolute infancy, tiny. And Pat and I would go, like, Pat and I both, like, you know, going and getting shabu shabu or weird food or whatever. So Pat knew I was doing Gato Heroi, and Alex Knoss was part of it and all. So, you know, I talked.
Can I ask you, what did you have planned for Gato Heroi?
I don't know. I think like I always thought like Robbie was a guy that could be like a Sean Stussy. It's funny, like now I spend a ton of time in France and right in Guthrie where like Sean Stussy lives. That's where Robbie is. So it's weird. Like
Wow.
there's a lot of like similarities between I think Robbie and Sean Stussy. So my thought was like, well, we'll do the surfboards and we're doing a ton of surfboards for Japan. But we'll end up going into apparel and things like that. We had a cool store on a cool little store factory on Superior and Costa Mesa. So I think it had all the right ingredients to do something cool. It's still around. And
Build a name and brand awareness with boards.
Right.
But then
go into tees and apparel and accessories.
Yeah.
So,
off the blueprint of Stussy.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
and the name fucking Gato Heroi. I don't know why, but I fucking love that name.
Yeah,
that name is so...
It was so natural. Like, we got a cease and desist on Cream, which was CREME, and then Robbie it was so nonchalant, like, we'll just do Gato Heroi. I think, like, in my career, too, for whatever reason, like, I've been, like, around a lot of, I would say, on one hand, very eccentric founders, but also just brilliant, all of them like, and like I really have an affinity for like founders in this industry because to me they're so important.
Yeah.
Like, and I always
they're
think,
borderline.
None of these guys would be here. I get goosebumps. Like none of you guys would be here without Pat Tenori and Richard Wolcott and these guys that started this stuff. So
like Paul Frank
totally
is super eccentric.
Oh yeah.
Pat. I mean, like these guys are borderline like genius madmen.
Right? Oh, look at Gotcha, like so forward thinking.
Michael Thompson,
like,
yeah.
Michael, he set the industry on, on a call when he was doing what he was doing back then.
I heard, like, I forget who told me, but they kind of explained Gata Heroi and Robbie Kegel, like his parents were rich.
No. I mean, the story with Robbie is like, his mom was kind of a little bit out there and lived on like hippie commune, like with bongos and the whole nine. And I think Robbie was maybe getting a little bit neglected and was then adopted by an older couple who could never have kids. And, Robbie didn't grow up like a traditional kid going to school and stuff like that. He just had a really weird upbringing. And this couple that kind of adopted him, just took him in and gave him an incredible life and opportunity to surf and shape boards and just do rad stuff. So he still had a mom and dad in the picture somewhere, but he really was later in life, maybe 12, 13 years old, adopted by this family that kind of took him in and took care of him.
That's right.
Again, super eccentric, but just wildly creative, out of the box thinker, just incredible guy.
Yeah.
And how long did that run when you're working on that project?
So to close the loop on that, went and was doing Gato Heroi, but then took a job at RVCA. And the initial thought there was, I'll come in as like a brand manager or maybe do some marketing or something at RVCA, and then kind of split my time between both things. And
you and Pat hit it off.
Pat and I hit it off, and man, like for years, like I would just go over and see what Pat was doing. Like, and Pat was a guy like, no matter when you'd go to the building at 11:30 at night, Pat would be there grinding, And I remember like Pat's office, there was he had so much shit in his office. But
books, pictures, imagery, inspiration, one of a kind.
But it was so incredibly inspiring. And I remember, like, for a while there was this like trail you had to walk around these books of like Rin Tanaka books and just magazines and people sent in to get to the couch to then talk to Pat. So for forever I would just I'd go home, eat dinner, whatever, and then I'd be like, I'm just gonna wander up to RVCA. So I would be up there all the time just seeing what they're up to. And RVCA, I just thought at that time was like, oh my God, like this company is gonna be huge. It's gonna be, this dude has an incredible vision. Like it's different than anything I see out there. The Artist Network program in his time was way ahead of anyone else doing that. And so I jumped into Ruka at the time as the brand manager, but quickly, like the job, because Ruka was on fire and growing, that my job got intense fast, so I ended up selling my portion of God's Roy back to Robbie's aunt, the adopted mom, and diving headfirst into Ruka. So, and then, I think
what was intense about it? Because it was so successful, and
yeah, it was just it was growing at just an insane pace, that like just a feverish pace, and just the amount of energy and things that would happen in a day at Ruka was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Like whether it was the guys that would come in there to talk to Pat, like it was so bizarre. You'd have like Matt Costa walk in, and then all of a sudden a pro surfer and Christian Fletcher, and then you'd just be like, this is insane. I think what I worked really well with Pat because I listened and I really like
do a lot of that with him.
I just said, hey, I'm gonna be hopefully the guy that sits behind the scenes and executes and gets shit done. Yeah. And really like that's what I did really well for Pat in the beginning. Is like, hey, just how do I make sure that his vision is getting put out there the right way?
There was a time where you were kind of this brand manager, because again, I'm not spending all my time there. I'm close by, so I'm in and out a lot. But people were like,
"We already working
there?" Yeah, but like, what was Brad do? Like Brad's always here, but he's not working. It wasn't technically like, at least for the first few months, it was it wasn't like, oh, Brad's coming in and he's doing, like when you say brand manager, it was kind of like you're help facilitating
brand manager, not brand manager.
Brand manager, whatever you're doing, helping Pat. Like that was the kind of initial like jest that we got. We're like, wow, okay, Brad's here to kind of help facilitate Pat's needs.
It's weird. Like initially, like when I first came in, like we thought, well, let's hire a president. We hired Dan Levine. Like Pat and I thought, like we need this guy. We need a guy that could do that. We pulled Dan Levine from Hurley, and Dan didn't last long. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
but Dan was probably in the business and out of the business within like 8 months. And again, Ruka was a different beast. Like the grind and the pace was just absolutely intense. And I would say in a good way, but some people just aren't wired for that.
Yeah.
Like, I would go into that building at 8:30, maybe Pat would call and be getting a coffee, and then I'd get back in my car, meet Pat somewhere, and we'd grind it out till 7. We'd go out for dinner, come back to the building, and we're back at it till midnight. Like a lot, So I think, you're either, and I loved that. Like I just love, I'm like, we're going to take over the fucking world. Like, and again, I get chills just thinking about it because it was such a special time, and just being around like that energy. Pat, people say, sometimes Pat's challenging to work with. I think a lot of like brilliant, eccentric founders are,
for sure.
Pat's demands on what he expects the bar is high because, he wants shit done right, really.
And he's one of those guys from the beginning. He did it all. Like it wasn't like I just come in and hired all these people. Like it would be like he's doing it all at the beginning.
Well, people don't realize, and I said it earlier, like that domestic production. Like Pat understands how to make a pattern. Pat could sew a garment. He's a guy that wants sewing machines in his building. He's old school like that. Yeah. And a lot, like I said, a lot of guys think, well, shit, I went to Finneman, I know Illustrator, so I'm a designer. It's not.
We could have somebody do that.
Yeah. So it was an awesome. Ruka was an awesome experience. Pat, again, I was executing his vision, but I think Pat gave me some wins. Like I had some ideas here and there, and you go, well, shoot, let's do it. Like I had this idea to do the Chinelli bikes, and I'm still super into bicycles, and so. It wasn't like, well, we're doing everything, and no, I don't want to, give Brad a win here. Like I was able to get some wins, and I really, really enjoyed it, but the pace was gnarly.
Yeah.
Like, it
really, sounds, really he's such a demanding guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've seen him in action in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine being part of that every single day from fucking dawn to dusk and beyond.
Well, the day was, in the early days, like that was his networking. That was him kind of directing and doing all that. And then in the evenings was when he really got his work done. So he put in a lot of long hours, you know. But, you know, again, like he knew he did everything. So I guess when he, you know, brought people in, you know, it was, you know, like you said, the bar was high, but, you know, he was always analyzing everybody else in our industry, who's biting us, who's catching up. And he was like a couple steps ahead of everybody all the time.
Yeah. It's funny when you brought up Dan Levine, and I have no idea who Dan Levine, I know who Dan Levine is. And it was like one of those things that always irks me is like when you hire people that are from some other business that is successful, that's out of our industry, right? And you're like, oh yeah, you know, he is part of that business, and you know his title is this. He's probably, you know, the right guy for the job just because of his association, right? But literally, like, you still have to have a grasp on our culture, and even, you know,
and you got to mesh with the crew, the people.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the culture of the company already.
Well, I think in our industry, I would say it does matter a whole lot. I mean, you know, people could say what they say about a guy like Paul Naudet, but I loved watching the stab piece when Paul saw, you know, I don't like outsiders coming into this industry. And, you know, so Dan's a good dude, and I actually learned a lot, and we still are friendly. But why people like your podcast is people buy into authenticity and sincerity,
for sure,
and it matters a whole lot. So I think that is probably why I was able to get wins with Pat. I get emotional thinking about it, but because, you know, I could talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah,
you know, Pat's a good surfer. Still, I mean, if Pat goes out, he could still rip anytime and not surf for a year and go out and surf really good. But I think because I knew guys like Jay, and I was you know, grew up shaping and stuff like that, I got a little bit of street cred with Pat that probably other guys wouldn't have got. You know?
Well, not just that, you're like putting in the work.
Yeah.
You know, and putting in the time and like helping him execute the vision.
It's cliche, and everyone says that, like, oh, well, you have to work hard, and, you know, like, everyone will tell you that. And
for sure.
And for me, like I said earlier, I was a shitty student, you know, but I kind of had a feeling coming into it, like, I'll outwork fucking anyone. Like, I'm going to come in and absolutely work circles around anybody and put myself in a position to get the opportunities just because I'm simply going to outwork them. And I really did.
Well, I mean, we talk about like the common denominators of why people are successful, and it's, you know, hard work. You can't get around that, you know, and, you know, being able to talk and communicate and delegate and, you know,
I think the authenticity part for our industry, I think that keeps us and good people in the positions that they're in. Because, you know, if you're authentic and you're willing to put in the hours and the hard work, that, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It matters a lot.
So that was your first stint at RVCA.
My first stint, you know, then RVCA sold to Billabong. And we could talk for hours about that. Long story short, we were growing like crazy, you know, like, and in 2008, it's, you know, I think like, oh man, I hope that's not about to happen again. I hope not. But the economy dried up, the real estate market crashed. Like most growing companies, we had our factor relationship was Wells Fargo, and not just RVCA, but everyone, the banks turned off the money, and we were forced to do something, and we sold to Billabong. I think, you know, Pat today would probably say, you know, there probably was other things we could have done, and we certainly could have, you know. Sometimes I beat myself up thinking like, man, there could have maybe been another better option there, but we did it, you know, and you know, I moved on, and for me, moving on was an incredible experience for me because I started a company with a couple people. Conan was a part of that company, which I didn't talk a lot about Conan at all in Ruka. Conan's relationship was always a little bit odd. Like he'd be in China for a year at a time, maybe, or maybe he's in France, or I don't know.
Who knows
maybe.
where?
But he was, kind of a mysterious guy. But my jump out of Ruka into this new company, it was weird because Ben Soto, who I mentioned, we worked at Paul Frank. I got him involved, but we didn't know what we were gonna do. Like I remember we had a warehouse, which was weird. Like we got a little warehouse, and we were sitting at a card table, and we had a few ideas. Like we were making these 3D shoes that were not good. They were kind of like Crocs with dinosaur components on them and stuff. They're like almost there, but not quite that good. And then we were doing these eco-friendly plastic bags, and then we were doing like some licensing work for Shrek. Like taking Ben's artwork and saying, well, shit, I know I could go make us money if I just take Ben's artwork and we pump out product for Shrek and invoice them, and maybe that will get some money coming in to figure it out.
So how would that?
Did you leave did you leave Ruka on good terms, or did you get forced out? Or
no, I left.
Okay.
I basically as soon as the deal was done, I met with Paul Naday and just told him like, hey, I'm burnt. I'm burned out and need a break and need to do something totally different. And Paul said, go spend a week at the Billabong house in Hawaii, recharge, come back. If you need a month off, if you need 3 months off. And I went to Hawaii and never came back, and again, like I said, I would have handled stuff different. Again, I get emotional thinking about it. I owe Pat more, and I should have been a lot more, courteous to Pat and how I left the brand the first time. But I truly was. I was burnt. And putting together a deal and like that and the due diligence and everything. I had to free up and get away and do something totally new.
Because you were part of that due diligence process.
I would say I spearheaded the deal. I was Paul Naday said hey, you're the architect of the deal. So I did a ton of it. What I didn't mention, like I left and for a little bit consulted for how I ended up developing a relationship with McKnight. I consulted a little bit for Quiksilver and worked on VSTR and Raskullz and Summer Teeth. So did that for a little bit while we were trying to get our company started. That was just a little paycheck to help pay the bills. It was kind of fun, tinkering around with some new brands and stuff. But we were doing these wacky shoes and stuff, and then one day we had the idea like, why don't we put these same 3D things on a helmet? Like kids have to wear helmets. It's the law, and kids go around the corner and stash the helmet in the bushes, or just it's hard getting a little kid to wear them. So we're like, what if we like made the helmet fun, and we ripped the 3D components off the sandals and glued them onto the helmets. And we thought, okay, there's something here. Like this is just, it's kind of a dumb idea. No one was doing it at the time, but we thought like, well, there's something for this. Little kids would think this is fun to wear a unicorn helmet, or so we went to the Interbike trade show, and like last second we called Interbike, hey, do you have a booth? They said, yeah, we'll get you. And it's like they probably pushed 2 booths apart to charge us the money to be there with a card table. But the very first customer that came up was Target. And it was funny because going into that trade show,
where was the show?
Vegas.
Okay.
And your samples were just kind of like
little bit hooky, little crude, like. And I thought being coming out of Paul Frank and Ruka, I thought like, oh, we're gonna sell these to bike shops. Well, and then the first person that came up and was Target. Like I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, wow, Target wants to, and the guy was asking hey, have you sold these to anyone else yet? And I'm like, no, you're the first person looking at them. And Then the next person that, bike shop dudes were walking right by, we're just sitting there like dummies, like, okay, this, like maybe the people don't like these or what's up. And then the next person that came by was the buyer of Walmart. And I remember the guy, when the Walmart guy left, the guy in the booth across from me came over and said like, oh man, like I've seen the two buyers, like you just met with the only two buyers that matter. I'm like, wow.
Fuck.
But I didn't know it. So I flew to Minneapolis to go to Target, and going to the Target building, man, it's so different. Like think of like meeting with Jax or AP, or like then you go to Target in Minneapolis. It's like, oh, okay, wow, this is crazy. Different economies of scale with this business. So
what did you bring? Helmet samples?
Brought the same samples we had at the trade show.
How many SKUs? Like how many
we only had
four?
We had four styles. Like that was it. So
what was the cost
of making these helmets?
Yeah,
like retail.
And how much would you sell them for? Wholesale, retail?
Yeah, I mean call it just roundabout like $12.50 wholesale, and they retailed for $24.99.
Yeah,
we went in there, and the guy's like, we want to do end caps, and it's going to be in 1,700 stores on end cap. And I'm like, okay, like I have no idea what that means, So then they said we'll send you a PO. So my partner's like Ben's like, well, how'd it go? I go, I think it went good. Like they're talking about an end cap, and that probably is good, right? Like that's probably a lot, So
1,700 doors.
Yeah, 1,750 doors. So anyway, the PO comes through, and it was insane. Like I was like, oh my god! Like the amount of helmets they ordered was
20,000 units.
Like way more than that. So and again, the economies of scale. Like during the peak of that helmet run, we were shipping 60,000 helmets a week to Walmart, like a week.
So wait. Target was 1,750.
Yeah, so we launched on an end cap, and how Target works is they'll try stuff on an end cap. If it sells through and the end cap performs, then they'll invite you to this review where they're looking to put stuff in line. And so the end cap performed incredibly well, and they took two of our styles and put two of our styles in line at every day at Target. And fast forward, now it's like most of the styles at Target are 3D helmets that like we just had this, we called it taking pegs, but we just had this mentality of like, we're just going to go in there and take every single peg we could get in that helmet section. And they liked us. You think about, we talked about action sport industry being culturally connected matters. Like we'd go into these, they do it on purpose at Target. Like you're in there with the Bell guys, and they're all wearing triple pleated cotton Dockers, and guys that are 55 years old and balding, and just
Whoa.
I'm sorry, Jay. I'm kidding.
I'm just kidding.
Bad balding, like Gallagher balding. So anyway,
but
rest in peace.
But you guys weren't stuffy and super business. You were just fun, and
we were super fun, and we went in there just being like ourselves, and we're funny, and we're wearing jeans, and the buyers are young, and we're like, oh, we have this and this, and we literally like have Ben on a computer, and like the girl would be like, oh, you should do like a pink unicorn, and we'd be like, here, like this, and they were like, yeah, oh, send me a sample in a week. Like we just took that like hard work mentality, and just developed relationships with these buyers, and it just killed it.
What was your margin on a helmet?
Like it's different because the economies of scale are so different than action sports. So we'd get like mid 40s on a helmet, like 46, 48 points on it. But we were selling a lot of helmets,
And a lot of it, I'm sure, was factory drop ship straight to them. You're not having to like.
We're talking containers
of. Oh yeah, I mean
like 40 footers.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was such a different business. The other thing too, if you think about these silly helmets, we call it cake decorating, like is the term we kind of made up for it, because you have a bike helmet, and it's one. You have sizes, but the sizes were dictated by the pads inside.
Yeah,
and then it's just cake decorating the components. So we started with one cutie cat. And then after that, we're like, let's do different cat. You know, probably we had 25 different cats at the end of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or unicorns.
My kids have
whatever.
Yeah. Shark, dinosaur.
Yeah, I mean, I see
the Mohawk one.
Mohawk.
So that we named the company C-Preme, but the brand that took off was Raskullz. So,
Raskullz.
I mean, I probably see a Raskullz helmet every day.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is like there's some of those styles are the same ones that we sold in years ago. They just you just don't know. It's like, man, there's new 3-year-olds every day that need a helmet.
So most brands have to kind of start locally, grow their distribution.
Yeah.
You guys went 0 to 100 in overnight.
Yeah, it was a totally different experience. And
when was the first appointment after Vegas? Like a week,
like
2
a
weeks?
week, yeah. Like a week later, we flew there. And then it was funny. Like we flew to Walmart, and oh my god, like doing business with Walmart, totally different. Totally.
Where are they
like,
at?
They're in Bentonville, Arkansas. And doing business with those guys, like they have all kinds of rules. Like you go to Target. Target's pretty nice. Like there's incredible artwork on the buildings, and it's a fancy, really nice building. Walmart is like totally stripped down. Like intentionally, they don't want
to show.
Yeah,
or just like strictly just low key.
Totally. So Walmart was pissed because we shipped Target first. And that started becoming like a real strategy. Is like, okay, well, we have this new unicorn helmet. Do we show it to Walmart first or Target first? And you had to be really careful because they would get really pissed if the other guy had it. And they all wanted exclusivity, and they don't want, what are you doing here? So, what we did, we started with helmets, and then the same buyer. It's the same thing you deal with, Jay. You have one buyer buying everything.
Yeah.
So that buyer, we're like, well, what else does this dude buy? Well, he buys skateboards and bikes and swim equipment. So we went in and, we were really disruptive in just changing everything we could. We made like skateboards that were cut out in the shape of sharks or ice cream cones. And in the POs, it's just so different. Like they go, we'll try that. You give me a PO for 10,000 units, and that's trying it.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, oh my God, So Ben, my business partner and now brother-in-law, like he spent a ton of time in China. Like he'd go there. The company had an apartment there, so he'd go and spend 4 months in Hong Kong making sure stuff was right. But it was one of those lightning in a bottle type of ideas that was just like, oh my God, just dumb. When people say like, oh, I had a dumb idea and no one was doing it before, it was that.
And how did you guys like? Usually, in typical business, you start with a little nest egg, some sort of loan, and then you start kind of like borrowing more, paying more, growing. Like, how did you guys finance that?
Two of my partners had
bankroll,
significant net worth because one came out of the sale of Ruka, and the other one had family money. So and for us, like looking back, like it was scary. Like I came into that, didn't take a salary or anything. Like we just all went for it, you know. And after about a year, like we started taking salaries and stuff, but it was truly like a bootstrap. The initial seed money came from the two other partners, me, Ben, and then two other guys.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being able to finance itself. The other thing about dealing with Target is when they say net 30, it's net 30. Like it's not net 60, or you don't have to take a guy.
It just shows up in your bank account.
You don't have to go
30 days.
Take a dude out to lunch and be like, so that $800 you owe us, like
and you're not collecting from 1,000 little bike shops. You're collecting one mega freaking store that
totally
values the business.
But I learned so much from it, like thinking like, well, how does that? And then I went back into the action sport industry. So
you idiot! I'm just kidding.
But it's like if you're doing business with Walmart, you better do what you say you're going to do. Like you can't. There's no like hustle, or you got to if you promise them one of those, because the economies of scale are so big. You're dealing with massive units and
can't have an F up on 10,000 units. Like it's got to come in at exactly like.
And
totally.
What's crazy is some of the biggest buyers that do the most business, they're the easiest people to do business with, but they're also you can't fuck with it.
Yeah, no room for error.
Yeah, no room for error. But they make it really easy for you to do business with them.
Yeah.
You just can't fuck with
Was it tough finding like supply, like production, like, or was there a couple, like a shoe brand, like there's 3 manufacturers that build majority of shoes?
Yeah, I've gotten really lucky. I keep saying naive, like just being naive. Like we went to China and we were like searching for like who makes helmets, This guy told, he's a good friend and actually invested in my last company I sold. So we've had a good relationship. But we met this guy who we looked at like who he was producing for, and it said Schwinn and other people. Like, oh, we found the guy that makes helmets. We went out and met with the guy and told him, hey, we want to make helmets. He showed us all these helmets. The guy didn't make helmets at all. Come to find out, like 2 years later, he fessed up and told us he made decals for bicycles. So he was a printer that was making.
But he didn't want to turn around the business, so he was subbing it out.
to make it?
Dude, the guy literally went and found a friend to make the initial POs, and in the meantime saw the amount of volume and went out and bought his own EPS foam machines, and we grew together. And now the guy's still, today, he's one of Bell Helmet's like largest manufacturers, and he became like a really good friend. But I'd say the one thing about like the Chinese factories that I've worked with, like that guy in particular, like just wildly entrepreneurial. Where like, there's a saying like, hey, if someone gives you a good opportunity, just say yes and then figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, that was a
Fake it till you make it.
This dude just absolutely, but spent a ton of time in.
Hey, you make helmets?
Arkansas.
Yeah, I make helmets.
Yeah, pretty much. And the guy literally had like samples he didn't make. Like later on, like you go over there, you go to dinner, and so at one point he told us like, hey, like we just laughed. We're like, well, you pulled it. Good for you,
That's fucking incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts.
Because I mean, again, that's the interesting side of the conversations is like to have an idea and a brand or whatever, but the execution on the other side of finding somebody to make it, logistics, like how like it's freaking crazy.
Going back when you first came out with the helmet, right?
Yeah.
Like, and started doing the funny, quirky, cool Raskullz.
Yep.
Did you show your wife and your friends first, like the little test tube kind of like?
I kept it.
Hey, is this a good idea or not? Like.
No, I mean we kept it, like Ben and I both like kept it pretty guarded, and we were pretty quiet about it for a long time. Like I don't think anyone knew it was us or what we were doing. And I told you earlier, Lyndon, I've probably to a fault, I've kept a lot of things I've done kind of a little bit just quiet, you know. So no, we did hire quite a few people. Like most of that office at Raskullz was Paul Frank people that like I just liked and trusted and did great work for me earlier in my career. So there are a handful of people that knew, but we were pretty guarded about it.
Yeah. Because you don't have to really ask too many people if that's a good idea or not, because it's a fucking slam dunk, right? But when you're first starting and you have to figure out how to sell it, and it's the Interbike show that you do it, and it's just so crazy that here's an industry that neither of you really know except for making cool stuff in an industry that's outside of your realm, and you get two of the biggest buyers in the world come to you and give you.
Thinking of those guys, like you just think like, I still like send the Target buyer Christmas cards and stuff because the guy changed my life. But that you think about those guys, like, and we ended up like we had a full office and staff in Bentonville, in Minneapolis. We had showrooms. Every company in the world that does business with Walmart does. You have to. You have to have, because the business is meaningful enough that you just invest and do that. But yeah, it was an awesome run, and we did we did the 3D helmets. We did these helmets called Sparkles that you see them. They're like really hectic and have all kinds of graphics and stuff. We did a helmet called Bolt that had a video camera in the center of it. So sold the company to Bell Helmets, and which was an awesome experience. But then
how much?
Decent.
What was
okay?
What was the reasoning of selling? You just knew you.
Oh man, again, and I've done this a couple times. I've talked to you just on a friend level about it, Jay. But Maybe I've been a bird in hand guy to a fault sometimes. Maybe growing up and having educators as parents and thinking like safety, like we should have sold it. Like we should have kept going. What we're really scared about two things: lawsuits, and it happened a few times where we'd get sued, and you'd think like, oh man, like we're protecting kids. We're doing everything we can to encourage a kid to wear a helmet, and sometimes a kid
gets hurt.
Yeah, and you can't control it. And number two, we were really worried about Bell or Pacific Cycle knocking off our idea. And we had design patents around like our Mohawk, but we didn't have a utility patent on and being able to put 3D on. And we started seeing it, like being in China as much as we were.
You're going up against monsters, and if they wanted to get after you, they could have just crushed you.
So we saw like, particularly Bell, like we'd be in factories in China and be like, oh shit, who's doing
who's copying our
the
stuff?
Hello Kitty 3D one? Like, oh, we don't have a license for Hello Kitty. Like, that's a little scary. We got licenses on the tail end. Like, I was able to get the Marvel license. We had Nickelodeon, so if you ever seen like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was all part of our group. But we didn't have Disney. Like in Disney proper, like you start going out with like Disney characters, we're like, oh, that's a tough fight to fight. Yeah. So that worked. The lawsuits and getting copied by the big guys scared us. So, and we sold it to Bell, and it was, it was a life-changing thing for me and the group of people there. And I worked for Bell.
And that's the first business that you made and sold.
Yeah. Okay. And with some partners for sure. Yeah. But then I worked at Bell, and it was awful. It's just everything you think about. Like the people were nice, but private equity owned, and just wanted to change everything. Bell's in a city called Scotts Valley, which is up north. You kind of
inland San Francisco,
basically. Yeah. So
we have water polo there.
Yeah, beautiful area, but just everything changed and was different. So I kind of had a little bit of the entrepreneurial itch, and what was interesting about helmets and reflection was at mass market there was two people. There was Pacific Cycle, who makes Schwinn and a bunch of brands you've never heard of, and Bell. That was it. There's only two
that dominate the helmet market.
Yeah. So we thought about that, like, wow, what made these stupid helmets work? Like, and yeah, they're new and different 3D, but a big part of it was like you had a category that was stale because people were kind of just resting on their laurels. There's only two players, and we thought we could go in there and be wildly disruptive if we just do something different than the guys that are out there. So Ben and I thought, like, what's like that? Like, what's another category that, and like my wife would laugh at me, but I just walk Target every day, like, and going, what else is like that? Okay, toothpaste, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and and then I started walking down the cooler aisle, and I'm like, okay, you got Coleman, Igloo, and the styrofoam one. That's it. Like, that's it. I told Ben.
Because Yeti wasn't like thing yet, right?
That was premium and very niche.
Yeah, but totally.
Yeah, not a.
Actually, wasn't like in our.
No, and I was on our radar. I was partly at the time thinking of coming out of helmets. Like I knew everyone at Target. I was there all the time. I knew all the buyers.
Yeah.
So specifically thinking like, how do I leverage those relationships in some other category? So I took Ben. He's awesome, but I have to push Ben off the cliff. Like Ben,
you have to really sell him.
Yeah.
You're going with me.
So I pull up at this intersection one time, and I'm like, Ben, CVS has coolers, right? And so yeah. And Walmart has coolers, right? And so yeah. And I go, Dick's Sporting Goods has coolers, and the gas station has coolers. Every one of these guys has coolers. And I'm at Target, I was looking, and Walmart, there's only two people that have coolers. We're gonna make coolers. And he instantly was like, well, we already know how to make bike helmets. They're made out of foam, and like we can make coolers. So, I quit working at Bell and kind of, again, just crazy, but rented a building across from Four Sons. And, before we really needed to, it's just part of like, you get that little space, you're like, I gotta make shit happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got
forces you to.
You got some skin in the game. Like, hey, this isn't just a thought. We're doing it,
So we made the initial
kind of building or renting it and getting office space before you even have it launched.
Yeah. Stupid, But
What did you call this company?
We always do like a holding company and then a brand. So we called it Land and Sea Recreation, but the brand was called Yew Stuff, like you. But the buyers like that. Like I learned that from Pat. Like I was so Pat, like why Ruka? And people say Rivka or RVCA. Pat's like the ambiguity made people talk about it. So as silly as it was, like it gave us a story. Like going to Target, they'd be like, "What is you?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, in surf culture, like if your friend gets a good wave, you give them a you, you know."
Yeah, we do that all the time.
But they love
Like,
that.
shit.
They love it.
Yeah, another round of shoots there.
Totally. So anyway, we made this cooler and got a big PO from Target, and then I started thinking like,
Wait, what made you the styrofoam cooler?
right?
What did you do different?
Think of a bicycle helmet, and that's all it was. We just took EPS
graphics.
foam and wrapped the foam with a hard shell like a bike helmet. So super cheap, but the insulation was great, and it worked. It worked really well. We knew how to make it. So we flew to Target. They said, "Hey, we'll try it." They bought a hamburger style and one that looked like a sunset. But there are a lot of tricky things about coolers where, I started thinking like, oh man, you're shipping a lot of air because they're really light and it's hard to like, how do these guys do this? So I tried to do the sharp
damage control.
Totally, and cost.
And then like how to, stack them and pack them.
Yeah, and started doing a lot of research. And I'm like, that's weird. Like all the big cooler companies make them here. Like if you think like Igloo's in Katy, Texas, in like a 2 million square foot facility making their own coolers. Like Lifoam, who makes the styrofoam ones, are up in Vernon, and they're making them here. They're not shipping them across the ocean because they're shipping
Air.
Space. So I flew to Igloo in Katy, Texas, and told the CEO. I said, "Hey, I want to meet with you," and I said, "Hey,
How long into the business was this?
This is like, it's unbelievable." So when I was at the intersection showing Ben was like August. We had a sample of the cooler by November, and I was in a meeting with Target in February, and now it's June, and I'm at Igloo.
Wow.
So like half a year.
Yeah, 6 months.
So you went to them because they had the supply chain here domestically.
I thought, well, we could tap into their reps, we could tap into their manufacturing. Did you have a patent or a trademark on? We had a patent, utility patent, which is good. And I met with the CEO and I said, "Hey, these just launched at Target yesterday. You're going to see these, and I'm looking for a partner that could buy 30% of the company, and we could do the first right to buy it down the road." And I go, "By the way, like Ben and I worked on like a pipeline of other stuff. We're like, and behind this, you're going to see lunch bags and this and this and this." So I met with the CEO and flew home. Ben, I called Ben and he's like, "How'd it go?" I go, "I think it went pretty good." So the next day, the CEO called me and goes, "Hey, I'm going to fly to California. Can you meet me somewhere?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So, I met the guy at a Starbucks and he goes, "Look, we don't want to invest. We want to buy the whole company." I go, "Well, it's not much of a company yet. It's really like, it's just a few of us, and we've got one PO." And he goes, "Look, we need people like you to come in and take Igloo to a different level, and we want to buy your company, but really the talent, the people in your building." And so
wow, that's not what you were thinking.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, you just wanted to have somebody to help you sell and distribute and make.
And it was an interesting deal, which led to a lot of innovation in a weird way.
Fucking stop real quick. You're saying 6 months. In 6 fucking months.
I kid you not. When we had that, we're at the intersection thinking of what should we make, was August. We sold the company in the following September. So 13 months from idea to selling it. But hold the thought. Like, this is not doing a gigantic transaction. It was a tiny company in its infancy.
Yeah.
So we got a check, and it was pretty good, but it wasn't like a gigantic watershed event. Like we had a little company with a few POs from Target and sold our little company to Igloo, but it was great. And I think like I've done a lot of interesting stuff. And one of the things in reflection I'm most proud of is like we turned Igloo around. Like Igloo put every single thing out facing. So they had the idea, hey, let's just keep manufacturing in Katy, Texas. We want to put design, marketing, everything else in your company out here. So we did that. Like we hired graphic designers from the action sport industry. I brought in Brian Garofalo to do marketing. And we took a company that the owners of the company told me like, hey, this company's dying on the vine. It's just a commodity. We just want to dump it. And I never saw it that way. I like walked in that building and I'm like, these guys don't even know what they have. Like
iconic.
Yeah.
It's freaking a legacy brand.
Totally.
It's like we all growing up with this brand and using it. Like let's fucking make it cool.
Totally.
Like,
and
it's really just bringing it back to the market and reintroducing,
slapping some lipstick on it, but yet in a fucking cool way.
Yeah.
So we had this like part of the selling of our company. I could look. I'm not going to just sell it to you and take a chance that you don't need us or whatever. We want no cut deals for 3 years. Like you're going to have to employ us. And they said, yeah, like sure. But
what was your salary?
it was good. It was okay.
But
did you get royalties
they
or
gave
like
you-
how, like so you got, hey, we're gonna buy the company, we're gonna give you royalties.
So you asked about patents. So it was an interesting thing in that like we got an initial check up front. We got a check when the patent went through because we had patents on it, and then we got a royalty for as long as we were employed by the company. We got this royalty too. So it was a pretty good deal for the long haul. But
the cool thing is you got to set up your own Igloo office in California.
Yeah, we get Scotty Stopnick.
Yeah, Scotty.
Another
Rambo.
member of the crew.
Rambo.
Alumni
for sure. So because they couldn't fire us, we just went for it. We're just really kind of dead set on like turning the thing around. And just
We
saying,
had
like,
unlimited
you have to
resources.
do this,
But you had the production capabilities, you had all that stuff that would normally keep you a little bit more conservative and kind of like less risk, like all to the side. Now it's like, let's fucking have fun.
Did they come up with the idea of you being the new office marketing design?
No, it
Igloo?
was really
Or did
we
they?
pitched them. And
Senior
said,
Vice President of Marketing and Product Development.
Yeah, so you told them, hey, why don't you let us run with the ball of trying to?
we got a couple big wins, and that helped kind of get them comfortable with the idea of putting everything in California. Like so, going way back to Paul Frank, and I told you like we were kind of first on a lot of collaborations. Like the Igloo has the Playmate cooler, right?
Yeah.
And it's been around since 1973, and they've made millions and millions and millions of these coolers. And they were selling them at Walmart for $17.99, and they're great. They're just a good cooler to take beer to the beach for a day. It's very different than Yeti, but the first collaboration I did at Igloo was, I called Andy Davis, who's done a ton of stuff in the surf industry.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, would you want to do something with Igloo? And so we just took Andy Davis graphics and put them on a Playmate. But then we started talking to Igloo a ton about, hey, this is going to allow us, there's one. This is going to allow us to do segmentation. So we could go and sell Andy Davis cooler to a surf shop, and we'll keep selling them to Walmart too. So we put this Andy Davis cooler in Thalia Street of all surf shops, and in 2 weeks it sold like 240 units. And so I got up at the board meeting, and like I had two of them, and I'm like, this cooler right here is selling for $17.99 at Walmart, and this one right here is selling for $49.99 at the surf shop, and the only difference is the graphic. So I go, this will allow us to think different about segmentation in the brand. And that was the big thing we did with Igloo, is said, hey, we could sell a lot of coolers at Walmart and Target, but we could probably sell a lot to Dick's Sporting Goods and these other places. And there wasn't a day that went by at my Igloo career, even Jay just mentioned it, like, what about Yeti? And I'd say Yeti's great. Like, it's an incredible cooler. They're a little heavy, but, you know, that's because they keep, you know, stuff for ice for 5 days. But I'd say, you know, Yeti makes about 500,000 coolers a year. We do about 23 million. You know, we're making a cooler every 22 seconds. You know, so it's just different. And the average American, crazy stat, the average American has 3 Igloo products in their house. Like, if you think, like, you're probably like, oh shit, yeah, I have an Igloo Playmate and this and that. Like, so it's just, to me, I never saw it as a commodity. I saw it as a brand. You know, and something like, if we breathe a little life into this brand, what could it be? And the company grew a ton. You know, we were able to really grow it, and it did a lot of interesting things. Like, the styrofoam cooler led to Ben and I developing a sustainable cooler out of, like, pulp that biodegrades. That was a big game changer. So, you know, we really did some good stuff at Igloo, and it was fun. You know, the downside is, you know, even though we moved everything here, I was flying back and forth to Texas every other week. I had little kids, and you know, you miss your kid hit a home run at Little League, and you're like, oh man, what am I doing? And then Pat called me. and Pat called me at the right time, and
so you were just coming up on your 3 years?
Yeah, I was literally like, I was ending my term at Igloo, and Pat and I started talking, and I just missed it. I missed being around surfing. I missed being around the athletes. I miss, you know, and
This Igloo shit was too easy.
Igloo was great, man. It was really good. Sometimes I think, like, oh man, you know, like, you know, should I have jumped? And, you know, but part of it too, just talking about, I, you know, speak highly of Pat, and I have a ton of respect for him. A little bit of, like, I owed it to Pat. Like, I kind of thought, like, man,
it's my time to come back and kind of redeem.
Yeah, I didn't end things the way I should have. This guy gave me a huge break in my career. He needed some help, you know, and I thought, like, man, I'll come back in and try to, you know, get some help. And then, you know, was at RVCA for a couple of years, and then, you know, lo and behold, the owners moved me to Quiksilver, where I am now. So anyway, I'm jumping all over the place.
Yeah. So Pat called you and said, "Hey, come back. Let's talk." And what was your role?
Because I was officially, like, Board Riders was taking over.
Yeah. So
the Billabong and Quiksilver were separate, you know, and it was starting to kind of all come under one roof. And that's the kind of time frame when you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Pat, like, we made magic happen. You know, again, I always tell people I was really good at helping execute Pat's vision. Like, that's what RVCA is. It's Pat's vision, not mine. I just am there to block and tackle and get things done. So he just
block and tackle.
There's a lot of block and tackling, but, you know, he wanted to get back to doing some of the marketing and things we've done before. And, you know, I thought, like, well, shit, you know, I love the brand. I think it's special. I told Pat, well, private equity is not fun, and I'm sure this is going to be different than our first run together. But I went back for a couple of years, and you know, did, I think, a lot of good stuff during the couple of years. What I kind of liked about marketing, or what I liked about RVCA the second time, is we didn't have a VP of marketing, and I was able to do a lot of both. Like, I'd, you know, be kind of the global general manager, but I was really spending the bulk of my time on marketing, which I really like. You know, I really like developing go-to-market plans and doing collaborations. And with RVCA, we just had so many just cool opportunities to do collaborations with guys like Maddie Matheson, or just, you know, all Pat's relationships. But, you know, show your old geese, and that was really cool, being able to go back and spend the bulk of my time on marketing. So
yeah, I mean, you got to hand it to Pat, RVCA, and that whole team. They've just been so innovative and, like, creative and relevant in so many different genres.
Well, that was Pat's. I remember from the early days, Pat's like, I don't want to just be an action sports brand. You know, like, he thought bigger than action sports the whole time.
Yeah.
I want to be cool. I don't want to put out, I want to put out the best product in our marketplace without being too expensive. Like, everything had to have to pass, hey, we'll pay extra for the thicker thread. We'll put, extra sewn on the butt, like a lot of subtle details that you don't really see, but he was very
those
passionate
details
about.
are super important.
Yeah.
But the vehicles of marketing that
for
sets them apart and puts them in the highlight, like the MMA thing. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I have RVCA stories for days, but one time I was at ASR with, we went out to lunch and was Pat's good friends with Kelly Slater, and it was Kelly, BJ Penn, Pat, and I, and it's like I always tried hard like not to fan out. Like Pat's cool. Like that's just a day in the life of Pat.
Yeah.
But for me, like I'm like, oh my god, it's a fucking goat. This is rad. There's BJ, but just try to keep it cool and not fan out on those guys. But we were walking down the street and like, I kind of a little bit fought Pat originally on the MMA stuff. And Pat, I tell people like Pat is a legit black belt and an incredible boxer. I think Pat's dad managed Ken Norton. So,
You're kidding?
No, for real. But we were walking down San Diego in the ASR heyday. I'm walking down the street with Pat, the GOAT, and BJ. And who do people want to stop and talk to? BJ. It was unbelievable. Like,
Unbelievable.
We couldn't walk 5 feet in the BJ Penn heyday without him getting straight up mobbed. And I remember after this experience telling Pat, I'm like, dude, I think you're onto something with the MMA. Like I get it. I get it. Where at first I didn't get it, and I thought like, oh man,
it's really niche-y. I don't know how many people are gonna be stoked on it, and you saw firsthand, like, dude, these are,
Yeah, this is insane. Like there was nothing like in my career like more fun than going to Vegas in the BJ Penn heyday, like for a fight was like, you can't even believe like the madness of that stuff. It was really, really cool.
Well, it's like another thing that makes RVCA so authentic.
Yeah.
Because it's like so many people, surfers and
train,
whatever. They train. I mean, because of MMA is why you have a division called RVCA Sport.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why you guys have RVCA Sport, because of fucking MMA.
I mean, Pat and all of his buddies were like, well, we don't want to go train in, Under Armour or Nike or Everlast or any of this other stuff. Like, we just make it ourselves. And it just blew up.
People ask me like a lot, like my wife, when I took the Quiksilver gig, she's like, oh my God, RVCA's so cool. You're making that jump. And there's a lot of reasons why I did. Sometimes when the owner of the company asks you to do something, you can't say no.
Yeah. So,
but the big difference I tell people is like, Quiksilver is incredible, and I love the brand, and I love the people. Quiksilver is really singularly focused on surf. RVCA, I'd say, in all the relationships with Pat, and the aperture is so much wider where you can do MMA, and you can do art, and you can do surf and skate. Where to me, it's a little more challenging doing something that's focused on one sport. Even though that's the sport I'm most passionate about and love. It's sometimes it might be harder to do like a music collab because the musician, if he doesn't surf, there's not an authentic tie. Where RVCA had a lot more authentic ties to different things.
But it was all stuff Pat was in it. It didn't just see like, oh, there's money to be made in this. It's kind of more of that like authentic, like, hey, my buddies are artists. I'm
organic,
promote them. Yeah, organic
relationship that turns into a collaboration.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, which makes it even more.
Yeah, I mean, look
real.
Like you brought up, Matty Mathewson. It's like, I didn't really know. I'm not a foodie. I am a foodie, but I don't follow like that stuff on social media really. And we're like, oh, we're doing this collab with this guy. He's this like YouTube sensation. I watched it. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's like wild and funny and like just bigger than life. And I'm like, yeah, he just screamed, like he's a good fit.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that where Pat's like, oh, let's go find some chefs. It was like,
Yeah. So you're at RVCA for the second round. Things are going well. You're loving it, and Quiksilver comes knocking.
Yeah, the CEO, board writers said, hey, we're gonna bring Quiksilver back from the south of France to Huntington Beach. And talk to me about that opportunity, talk to Pat about the opportunity, and I ended up making the move from Ruka to Quick, and day one on the job, I had to fly to France and start unraveling the infrastructure in St. Jean-de-Luz, France, to move it back to Huntington, which was hard. I mean, it's the social system in France and kind of. So to me, like, the learning opportunity of it was great. And
You're either flying to California or fired. You either fly to California or fired.
it's in France, it's different. Like, you know, it might not be all that bad if you get let go, because you're gonna get
A year severance?
About three. Yeah.
What?
So almost 3. Yeah, you get 18 months from the company regulated by the government, and you get another year from the government. Then on top of that, they'll pay for vocational training and all kinds of stuff. So you think if you're like your situation, Jay, if someone says, "Hey, Jay, we're gonna let you go, but you're gonna get paid for 3 years and go surf with your kid," do that, like, it's kind of not the worst thing in the world, you know. For if you're in France, we're here for us.
Can you fire me? Oh wait, you're not my boss.
For here, it's catastrophic.
Yeah,
you know,
no, for
loses
sure.
your job. You're like, wait, I mean, 2 weeks, and I have a mortgage, and so it's a different situation there. So, you know, we basically moved everything to Huntington Beach, and that was kind of the first 6 months of the job. And you know, Quiksilver is incredible. Like, it's, you know, I think all the time of like the heritage of the brand, and
for sure.
the guys I get to talk to on a daily basis, and you know, hanging out with Bob McKnight and just hearing stories, or Mickey Nielsen. It's like, a lot of times I just think like, man, how on earth am I even in this position where, you know, I get to work with these people and deal with this stuff? It's just, you know, it's awesome, you know.
But for those that aren't, you know, like, that don't do a lot of traveling, that aren't in a lot of these other countries, it is like, you know, Quiksilver in Europe, Quiksilver in France, you know, in particular. It's like, you can't like go a day without seeing that logo like everywhere.
It's
like,
global.
It is, but you know, here, you know, if you're on the coast or whatever, like there, it's like a real lifestyle brand, you know, like it's pretty.
No, you're right. And the fact that Quiksilver's been in the south of France for 8 years,
Yeah.
they've over-indexed their marketing efforts and everything there.
Yeah.
So Quiksilver in France is a big deal still.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I spent a ton of time in France, and you know, I was at this restaurant this one night, and like the waitress started, you know, like, "Hey, you're here a lot." Like, yeah, I'm living in a hotel, so you go out to eat. What are you gonna do? She goes, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I work for, you know, Quiksilver." So what do you do there? And I'm like, "Oh, like, you know, the what you'd call the global general manager, like the president." And she's just starts laughing at me, like, "Ah!" And then like tells her friend, like, "Ah, this guy just told me he like runs Quiksilver." You know, they're literally like laughing at me. And like for the next like 2 weeks of being there, like every time I'd walk by, you know, it's a really cool part of the world. But every time he'd walk by, she'd just like laugh and be like, blah, 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 blah. Like, this guy says he's this Quiksilver guy, like he's full of shit. You know?
Yeah, this Americano.
Totally.
He's like, you know, trying to get lucky over here.
But no, it's a very, very different regarded brand there. And with Pierre Agnes, who, you know, was the president of Quiksilver for a long time there. He's a very regarded guy, and so, you know, I look at the position like, man, I'm like, I feel a responsibility to do right by the brand because of guys like Pierre and Bob, and just, you know, even like guys like, you know, like Danny Kwok, and just the legacy of it. It's like, I feel like having the keys to it's a big deal. Well, and there's a lot I can't control, you know, but the things I can, I'll try my best.
But you know, like regardless of where they're at in their space now, like you said, the heritage, how long they've been away, how they paved the way for so many brands to follow. And, you know, there's, you know, in our industry, like we all talk about it, we all work for different brands, but we all want everybody to succeed. You always want the best for.
You can't have just one brand.
No, but you know, like there's not a brand out there in our industries that we don't know people that work at, you know? And we're like, dude, we hope those people make the best decisions. You hope it stays afloat. You hope it goes right, you know? But, you know, Quiksilver's fucking Quiksilver.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's massive.
Since 1977? Well, Quiksilver USA. Or 76, 77.
69, founded in Australia.
And I rode for almost 10 years. And my whole childhood, I mean, to have that Quiksilver logo.
This guy always breathes about himself.
Like, I mean, I have a lot more deeper ties to it than like some because it was part of the brand.
Yeah, we know, Lar.
Yeah.
You bring that up quite a bit.
Oh, really?
I remember it.
Who are you sponsored by, bro?
Well, Mango.
Get paid for your stuff?
No.
Wholesale?
I got it for free. For a second.
But I mean, so Quiksilver now, you're running the helm. People know. Not a lot of people outside our industry knows it's owned by, private equity.
Yeah.
We're owned, by the same corporate company, Ruka, Quiksilver, Billabong, Element, DC.
Yep.
I don't know who else.
Roxy,
sorry. Yeah, I mean, without talking details, like what's going on?
I think
now?
the thing that, what private equity does is they buy companies and find ways to make them more profitable and sell it. So, when's that going to happen? I don't know. There's all kinds of rumors out there. I tell everyone like, hey, all of us, including myself, signed up to work for private equity. So we know what the outcome ultimately will be.
For sure.
And I pray because for everyone at all the brands, like you said, we're all bros. And I want a good outcome for everyone, including especially the retailers who, have supported the industry and the livelihood of so many people. Like you want a good outcome. Like I said earlier, some things that are out of all of our control. So at some point it sells, and then you have to just look and think like, okay, well now what does it look like? I think the thing for Quiksilver I think about is like, man, it's weathered a lot of storms.
So many.
Ups and downs and bankruptcy and pulling it to France and now pulling it back. Like I'll say this, man, it's a resilient brand. And like there's a lot of new people I've recently brought in, and then there's a lot of people like, my creative director, Nat Johnson, he's been with the brand for 17 years. He's an incredible guy. I was talking to him like, hey, what's your plan? He's all Quiksilver till the wheels fall off. He's all, I've been through so many things.
Yeah.
And but everyone like in this whole industry and being part of Board Writers, like the one thing, I'll say is like, people love the brands. Like the people that work within those brands truly like love the brands and they're resilient. They've been through a lot of ups and downs. And private equity is tough. Like I've done it now 3 times in my career. When I sold my helmet company to Bell, private equity owned. Igloo, private equity owned. Board Writers, private equity owned. So, they private equity guys have a thesis, and their thesis is buy and sell. So that's just part of what we're dealing with right now. So,
well, as long as the marketing's there and the product's good, and I mean, again, like I wish we had that era right now where you had a Kelly and Andy Irons rivalry with the brands and the logos, or like a Machado and the Kelly and the night, Dane.
So you guys
you want like marketing to rival as much as the companies as design, in all categories and aspects of the business. You need that across like a few different,
to keep it interesting.
Keep it interesting for
help
sure.
Drive marketing
and newness and edginess and kind of like have a little bit of gloat and a little accolade and checks of.
The other day when we first talked, and you were saying that one of the first things you wanted to do was bring somebody onto Quiksilver, right?
Yeah.
Griffin Colapinto.
yeah. I think I thought one of the things with Quiksilver, and some people might look at or hear this and think like, well, that's messed up, or people might look and think like, oh, that is right. But I think changes had to be made, and like obvious overt changes in the way you do things. Like at Igloo, like I had that idea, I'm all, let's change the fucking logo. And people were like, what? Like, I'm all, we have to make it noticeable that we're here to make changes and things. And Quiksilver's got a lot of legacy and a lot of heritage, but there's a lot of incestuous things with team writers and stuff that people look and think, they'll never change that. They're never going to get rid of this guy or change that guy. So I wanted to kind of shake the tree and be disruptive and get someone that would be like, that guy would never go to Quik, or that guy, And, I talked to Blair, and Blair and I are good friends, and he will kill me even saying
Come on the show, Blair Marlin.
Yeah, Blair. He wouldn't even like that I'm putting his name out there. But, that was my first call. Before I officially accepted the job, I called Blair, and I'm like, how do I get Griff? And he laughed at me and he goes, Griff will not come to Quick because, the Billabong and Shannon North. He's like, I don't know if that ever happened. And then, there was a path to make it happen because his contract was up, and really it's out there and staff talked about it and stuff. But Quiksilver in recent history has not had a problem with athletes wearing Monster or particularly Red Bull hats.
Yeah.
Billabong philosophically has not allowed their riders to do that. Billabong, you have Igloo who runs a rail sticker, but he's on a podium wearing a Billabong hat. So, my thought on that is I inherited that, like Kanoa and, Cali and plenty of guys were already on Red Bull before I took the gig.
Yeah.
But my personal take on it, no matter what people think about energy drinks, good or bad, whatever, my thought is like, man, you're not in this forever. And if a kid has an opportunity to go get a 6-figure check for wearing a hat, I'm going to let that kid do that.
For sure.
And honestly, like Red Bull does a lot of marketing that helps
other brands
and just helps our industry
for sure. They're
stay
big.
in people's eyeballs.
Yeah. You don't want to blackball a brand that puts in so much into every sport, thriller activity on the planet.
I can't believe that new WSL rule.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
watches and
what the heck?
And eyewear and hats and
we don't really bash anybody on the show. Like, I love that the WSL is there and they're trying their best to create great content.
Yeah.
But to throw something like that into the whole thing, you're like,
what's next? You can't have logos on your boards, and you look at some of these guys, and I'm coming from being a professional. Yeah, you want to be able to like make as much as you want. And I look at Italo, and I look at Gabriel, and I look at some of these guys, or whoever. It's like Audi or Ford or this, and they got watches, and they got sunglasses and drinks, and it's like fuck yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Good.
And all those companies are marketing him.
Yeah, telecommunications. It should be a NASCAR.
Think of when I talked about BJ Penn earlier, like. In the heyday, I think of the UFC of Matt Hughes and BJ and that whole era, GSP. You think of those guys walking out and they're wearing a Ruka shirt walking out, Ruka shorts, throw a banner over the ring, Ruka. Like, it drove so much sales and hype and awareness for the brands. Fast forward today, they have a deal with an apparel company and you have to... And that ultimately hurts the athlete because if you're... if you're a apparel brand, you're not going to pay unless the guy gets to walk out.
And that's a great point because going back to like how it takes more than one brand to be successful to elevate that group is at one point I probably had 12, 15 like MMA stores. Like it was that was what they carried. It was across, and there was 15, 20 brands who were fighter owned brands. From couture to tap out to punishment, like all these brands were able to sell apparel and tees, athlete tees and stuff and other gear. And it was like, that was a great little
and going back to this whole WSL fucking stupid whatever.
All that's gone.
Okay, what about other podiums in other sports? Right?
Yeah.
Like in tennis or Indy 500 or bowling or fucking, you know what I mean? Like those podiums, they're promoting their sponsors.
Yeah.
Like what makes the WSL think that they can be different as a sport, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really like...
No, it's tough. Like the thing I think about is like even boards. Like if you read that thing too, you can't like... Kanoa's so good at it. Like Kanoa gets on that podium with a Red Bull hat, beside Quiksilver logo, but he very intentionally holds the board so you see that mountain wave. Which we appreciate. That's great.
Yeah.
Take your Red Bull money. That's fantastic. But because think of the jersey too of the event. It's usually someone else. Like,
I bet that the guys are getting carried up out of the water from their fellow countrymen or best buddies. Yeah. And the first thing they do is somebody grabs the board, somebody throws them a hat, maybe it's a team manager or whatever, glasses, hat, and they're getting carried up.
I hate to make this about you again, but there's a famous picture
I was there
of Kelly winning pipe and Larson's got his Oakley fucking sunglasses on, carrying the board behind as Kelly gets charted up the beach.
Yeah.
Shared up the beach.
That's it. I was there. It's in a lot of books and mags and print.
Well,
Can I get photo incentive for that? I'm gonna retro.
We'll see as the industry changes. Like it costs a lot to be a title sponsor of a WSL event. A lot.
Yeah,
It's
a
a
lot.
7-figure check. So you think as the industry changes, what does that look like? Do endemic sponsors still come in and do that? Does it
Yeah.
always like I would, if I'm gonna guess, I think that looks a whole lot different 2 years, 3 years from now than it does today. You know?
Yeah.
So in that, I think probably there's something maybe we don't know as to why they're making some of those changes,
Yeah.
because it could look more like the UFC in the future, which is then why are you going to pay a top 10 guy that kind of money if he can't run your stuff on the podium? You
Yeah,
know?
there could be some other angles where they've really dug into other sports and stuff, and it could make sense, because if you get one of those other title sponsors and everybody makes more money, then great. But it's got to be down to the athletes. You can't just have it all go to corporate and not to trickle down to the athletes.
Yeah, the thing too, just back to Griff and like taking the gig, like pitching my philosophy to the board about when Quiksilver wasn't its best, was a good combination of performance and personalities. And you think it's kind of always had that yin and yang of a performance and a personality. That it's, if you guys would know better than me, but I look at like the last 30 years, and it's kind of rare for a guy to just tick both boxes and have that awesome, charismatic, put yourself out there personality, but then also be a guy that could be top 5. And to me, Griff Colapinto is that one
100%,
guy.
yeah.
And not only that, but geography, having a guy that is as good as Griff, as
Local.
charismatic, as entertaining as him, living in San Clemente. It's like, and think of our history, like how many times has there been a guy from SoCal that could really be a title contender, but then also has that personality where he's
Machado.
going to really influence a generation of kids. So to me, he for me was like my end all be all. I'm just like, man, if I could get one guy to really take Quiksilver team to the next level, it was Griff.
Yeah. Well, I think as a company looking at how to sponsor different personalities and different people for different areas, I got to have the cool guy, whether it's retro or longboard, and then you got to have the hardcore surfer, which could be the Mikey Wright, just mohawks and you got to have all these different personalities, but the YouTuber vlogger guy, not just him, but that kind of avenue as a revenue stream and a personality, that's big business.
Yeah,
for sure.
And
Cole.
the guys
Rothman.
and the
He's
guys that are
modern.
just contest driven only, which focus, hey, I'm focused on world titles and don't bother me and I don't have time, there's those guys,
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, like you said, I think Griffin has a good combo of personality, and him and his brother fucking rips so hard too, and they have
It'll be interesting to watch Crosby over the next few years too. I think he's a special kid too.
But they just have a great angle for sure.
I gotta hear the interview or the process of you getting those meetings with Quiksilver.
What?
Him getting the job, how many times did you get interviewed, or was it like?
It was an initial conversation with the CEO. It was crazy. Like Pat, myself, and the CEO were out to dinner, and the CEO just kind of floated it out there. And
As you guys are,
and then Pat wasn't wild about the idea. Pat and I talked a bunch, and
that guy just threw it out there at dinner.
Well,
Like, hey, what do you think?
Pat's like, cool, you're stealing one of my guys and you're, throwing us under the bus again.
yeah, I think Pat wasn't, like I said, he was not wild about the idea. And, then from there, I had several conversations with the CEO, and at the time, the guy that was the CMO, Shannon North, who's historically a Billabong guy. So, it was definitely a process, but they knew my track record because I'd worked for them for a couple of years, and So I think they gave me a shot because they saw that I was doing good things at RVCA. I think they really liked the marketing strategy and go to market of RVCA had, and thought that could be good. And then just my work ethic, like taking the job, they said, hey, are you willing to spend 50% of your time in France? And I said, yes. Said yes before I talked to my wife about it. But, I spent a ton of time this year in France and got to take the family over there, which was actually really
amazing,
incredible experience for little kids to go and surf in France and understand the culture there and stuff. So, it's been good. Like for me, it's like I love the brand. I love all these brands really. Yeah. Growing up and just being the way I grew up and being a C- level chubby surfer, but loving the sport and everything. To be working with these brands is like a dream come true. The private equity part sometimes is really challenging, and out of my control. But I think the brands are so special, and I love what I do on a day to day, particularly like working with the artists and athletes and guys like Griff is just cool. Like it's just a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, and I think when you're passionate, like us, we're passionate about the industry, and this is why we have the podcast. It's just not to blow smoke up our butts, even though we're pretty cool. Just kidding, Lyndon says it all the time. But no,
I think you guys are cool.
It's just about like celebrating like the sport and the industry, and like we said, we always say we want the industry to be healthy. We want all the surf shops and businesses to be healthy, and we're fans of pretty much everybody, all the brands, and that's truly like sincere on our end. Like, dude, we want, Quiksilver is a competitor, Billabong, against everybody's a competitor, but that's healthy and that's good, and it helps drive like, people to push the envelope, and it gets some rivalry going, and at the end of the day, it creates like, more creative content and puts a little pressure on brands to perform better and better design, and I mean that's, we need excitement in this industry.
Yeah. So off the record, what else are you working on?
Well, like I said, he's always got ideas cooking, and I remember one that a few years ago he was at RVCA and he shared. I'm not going to bring it up, but dude, you're working on. No, it could not be something. If he brings it up, it's cool. But it was something in the.
I'm not going to bring it up.
Something you would kind of throw.
Oh, that I actually did.
Frisbee?
No,
we made a football, and you'd have. I don't know. It was not everything I've done has been a hit. But,
so that wasn't a hit.
No, but I didn't spend a lot of time on it, and I've been busy with my day job.
Can we get a sample?
Yeah, I could definitely get you guys some samples.
Yeah.
You'll like it.
It's fucking awesome.
I won't talk too much. There's a Me Too movement out there that kind of slowed that football, so we're not going to talk too much about what the football may or may not have looked like or whatever. But anyway. But yeah, I don't know. Like I struggle. Like Pat asked me to come back. Like I said I struggle with, do I want to be an entrepreneur or do I want to work for a big corporate private equity company? And the guys that I admire and look up to, like I said, the founders I talked about earlier, like those guys are my idols or my heroes. Like the idea of being an entrepreneur again and having a company with 8 to 15 people, like I know I've got one more in me. I'm enjoying what I'm doing today, but I definitely, think I'd be remiss if I didn't try to do it one more time. And, to a fault, I'm a guy that wakes up with 10 crazy ideas. And, luckily, like you said earlier, it's guys that either execute them or don't. Luckily, I've had the burn in me to go execute a couple of them. So
we got to start hanging out with, what do we call them? Brizz?
Brizz.
Yeah, there's a Huntington guy called Cernicky of Death. I don't know if you remember this guy, but
no.
Cernicky of
Death. And so little Brett Schwartz used to call me Brizz of Death. I don't know why. So the Brizz thing stuck a little bit, but anyway.
That's funny.
But yeah.
So you're at Quiksilver. Maybe we'll see some new ideas come.
Something, who knows?
But yeah, I mean, again, we talk about this all the time, like that, the economy in general is kind of in a funky place, I think our industry is actually pretty healthy for the most part, outside of the drama with this private equity and, changes in WSL, whether it's good or bad, like it's kind of like, you never know if changes are going to be positive. And what I mean by that is the mid-year, like
Mid-year
there's a
cut.
mid-year cut. There's just a lot of like, newness going on. There's quite a few brands, coming up the pipe, Rivia projects, and you got
Canvas.
Former, you got a lot of surfer-owned brands coming up. You got the old guards, kind of, it's just a weird, time in surf. I think,
I love the rider-owned brands. I think that it's cool, and if those guys surround themselves with a business dude, they could be in a good spot. But I don't know. Like I for me, like cool events and cool projects. Like we just did a thing at Quiksilver, the Saturn tour, where we went back and just said, hey, let's go. Griff said something to me when we were going through the process. He goes, me and my friend are core lords. Like we're all about the core, And I love that. I'm just like, yeah, man, like that's awesome, So we did this Saturn thing where it's like, our take on like early 2000s stuff. But you're seeing that. You're seeing kids like asking us now for like, dude, you guys have a 20-inch board short? And like, I'm like, wow, that's, So we did this movie with, a cast of characters that you look at like our roster and you probably wanted to have said, well, these are
those guys fucking rip.
Yeah, man. The Kale Walsh is like all three of those guys. Rolo,
Was it Alan Cleveland?
Al Cleveland Jr., Kale Walsh, and a Rolo. They're all just
that Rolo guy is he? Where is he from?
He's Latin America, but he's incredible. And
he's gnarly.
Yeah, absolutely.
That movie,
his octopus part is like should get clip of the year, I think. But anyway, like people probably wouldn't have said like, oh, you're gonna put out a movie and that's the three dudes. But I like the idea of like having this platform for those guys. And like, and you always think like, someone like Dane, well, how much of that, how much did these brands help guys like that become who they were? Or, I think arguably a lot. Like I think, so I like the idea of giving those athletes a platform to really kind of get eyes on them and then support the core.
Well,
that we toured that movie around and all to every core store in Australia. And
well, that is like a refreshing take on an old school kind of mentality of how things used to be done. You look at the marketing pyramid, and of course you got your marquee, world paid, world collaborated athlete, and then you have your national or guys aspiring. But it always went down like where Quiksilver and Billabong and O'Neill, all the kind of like heritage brands have always done a good job, supporting like those lower tiers and giving those kids, ample like promotions, whether it's locally, a movie.
Something just popped in my head the first time that I saw your coolers. It was on the beach at was it a board riders club?
Yeah, it was. I just put them down
the
there
burgers?
for kids to grab them.
Was it? Yeah, I was like, what the heck is that? I'm like, holy shit.
And
there was like, was 4th of July, like, I think around the corner or just happened?
I just thought it'd be, at the time, I asked Casey and Zig, I'm like, hey, can I just give like every kid that comes down here a cooler? They're like, yeah, that'd be rad. So
it was pretty fucking cool.
I'm more and maybe like it's funny, like I run Quiksilver and I just talked about how excited I am about Griff Colapinto. Like back like Robbie Keegle and Al Nos and that, like Asher Pacey's one of my favorite surfers. Like that's really my cup of tea. Like I love the non-competition side of surfing a lot. This free surfing really, that's my cup of tea and what I did.
Me too.
But if I was going to say one thing like that I'm really jazzed on is like West Coast Board Riders is awesome.
Dude,
It was like the community aspect of it and what Ziggy and Moreno and Casey started and how strong it's going. Like I'm so like proud of those guys and any way I could support or be involved. I'm trying to through Quiksilver or personally.
Yeah.
But
I heard Quiksilver is our main sponsor now, right?
Yeah, main sponsor for HB, and then we did the Wheat Cup last year, and I'm trying to get more involved in it or get the brand more involved in it. But I absolutely love what those guys are doing, and for me, like I'd almost rather go watch one of those events than I would a WSL event. Really?
Well, that's a great point too, because I mean, from our working relationship, not just our friend, but like you have always like, I mean, I've had a dozen, maybe not a dozen, but quite a few presidents, at RVCA or higher ups. And
Well, you've been there for 20 something years.
for sure, I know, but like but Brad, and again, like we have
Brizz.
a personal relationship outside of RVCA, but it was like, hey, let's go talk to this shop, or let's go talk to that shop. Hey, let's go talk to Huntington Beach High School and Verdone and see if we could get, and it's whatever brand he's working for that he's going to obviously, try to get after. But Brad was always good about like community. How do we get in with the surf team? How do we get in with the local event? How do we get in with this? And I think that's genuine, and I think it's smart, and it's not like, something that should be overlooked. Like, oh, we got the Kelly Slater of the world, or, whatever, we're good. It's like, it takes a lot more layers to kind of infiltrate like areas. And
I would say I'm proud that I did that in the past. I haven't been as good at that at Quiksilver, part of because I spent more than 50% of my time doing that in France. So, there's a lot of guys like Duke I just owe a high five and stop by. And those guys have been through a lot of,
Make sure he washes his hands though.
They'll bring hand sanitizer. But just, the industry and friends and family and all sales and all kinds of stuff had a big impact on the retailers, which is tough. And
really tough.
For me, that's it's
unfortunate.
Yeah. But I think.
But it's, again, it just goes down to the way you think about business. And again, like, you're at RVCA, you're at Quiksilver now. Who knows where you'll be in a year or 5 or 10? And it's, staying like, look, I'm committed to, partnering and growing the business with wherever I'm at, But it's the smaller tier stuff that is equally as important as the Griffin Colapintos. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have that. Got to have that disruption upstairs, but you also got to make sure you're supporting like the smaller kind of out of the spotlight type stuff. It used to be
act
really
locally, think globally.
I like that. Yeah, it's an old saying.
Yeah.
But again, it's the shop flow kids, to the how do you become a rep? Well, you get a job in the surf industry, at the surf shop, and start networking and seeing who comes in and trying to work your way up. Like if you could flow a kid at the shop, like there's a couple that we're seeing aspiring pros, and they're working at the shop. Taj Miller's now at Surfside and under Duke's wing, and it's kind of cool to see like these kids work at the surf shops.
I had this experience when I was a kid, and it's fast forwarding of doing a lot with him lately, but another interesting entrepreneurial guy from Huntington Beach was this bike guy, Gary Turner. And
GT.
And I used to ride my bike up there and go through the dumpster, and the guy caught me going through his dumpster, and he goes, let me walk you around and show you the factory. And it was really had a big impact on just me understanding like business, and like, oh wow, they actually print these stickers and put them on the frame, and they're making it like. So I always remember that. Later on, I called the guy and took him out to lunch and thanked him, and we did some stuff. But I try, because that had such a big impact on me, I try to do that a lot with kids here, like the Castle Boys. Those kids rip, talk to their dad, and I'm all, hey, just bring them in and let me give them a tour of board riders to show them, because maybe one of those kids will make it. They're really, really, really good.
Yeah.
But you think of so many kids don't, and you think like, well, maybe that kid will remember that down the road of like, oh, that Brad dude showed me around, and there's all kinds of cool people working here, and there's jobs in this industry, and I want to show kids that too. Like I won't say his name and embarrass him. I have a really, really good friend whose son is, and he'll know I'm talking about him now because he listens to the podcast all the time. But his son,
of course he does.
His son is a good kid, first and foremost, which matters a lot. And he keeps the kid in school, which kids should go to school. Like,
definitely.
Go to your school dance and get all that experience. Jay went to school, like Jeff Deff went to school.
Yeah.
So these parents that pull their kids
Even
out of
Slater
school,
went to school.
And it's like parents that pull their kids out of school and don't have any kind of like, opportunity to go walk in and see all these jobs that the industry provides and stuff. To me, it's almost kind of sad. So my buddy, I'm always telling him like, hey, your kid is such a good kid, and the reality is he's probably not going to make it. He's probably not, but he's going to make it in something. I'm like, look, I run Quiksilver, and I was an average surfer, but I'm really happy, and I get to go, sign kids like Griff Colapinto. Like, that's a big deal, So there could be a way to, be in this industry in some shape or form your whole life if you play your cards right. But
Definitely.
the amount of parents that I talk to that have the delusions of their kids, like I literally talk to families that move to San Clemente so their kid could surf trussels every day and not go to school. And they're calling and saying like, wait, your 14-year-old kid doesn't have an apparel sponsor yet and you're moving to San Clemente to surf lowers every day because you think he's going to make the tour? Like, you're out of your mind. It's like, I feel so sad for those kids
crazy.
and what they're missing out on in life, thinking that that every single thing depends on whether or not they're going to make the tour or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then again, that's any sport, and the intentions of the parents is you want to live vicariously. You want them to have better
Totally.
life than what you had. But the kid, if you can't instill the drive, that mindset, you can help support, but you can't turn on a switch because you've put all that time and energy into them to make them want to do something that you want ultimately.
Totally.
And it's tough. I mean, I'm in that spot. I got a 14-year-old son, and I'm like, I was so fortunate surfing, and I'd love to have him go travel and live some of those years I got to. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? Like, knowing the business side, I'm like, man, if you just went to school and got a good education, you could go do whatever and travel the world and go surf your own boat trip anytime. It's just different times now, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot harder to make it, but the kid wants to go surf every morning. I'm driving. Kid wants me to video.
Yeah.
I'm on the beach videoing. A lot more than I should.
Yeah.
But
Dude.
we're stoked that you sat down and kind of gave us your side of
Is there
your
any
story.
Is there any well, when you do surf, what boards do you have now? A
Blankinship, bro. Come on.
I'm riding a lot of mid lengths and
Fucking hipster.
not from
Fucking canoes.
not from
Oh, what do you got, a gato, Roy?
no, not from a hipster standpoint because I'm overweight and have lots of injuries standpoint. So yeah, I should have said a fun board. That makes me
That's
sound
good.
less hipster.
Fun board. Something goes really
Less
fast.
hipster.
Easy to surf. It goes really fast. That's all.
My shortboard, I have a 42 liter 6.6 Lost that if the waves are really good and
Yeah.
I get inspired, I might pull that thing out. But no, usually on a day to day, I'm riding like 7.6 to 7.10 boards with a lot of volume that I could catch waves.
Whatever
And-
gets you out there.
And push my son in. My son surfs, but I've always thought I'm not going to be the dad that forces it. So if he, like you said,
Yeah.
Jay, if he's
Yeah.
asking me to go, I take him no matter
Yeah.
what. If he wants to, go to Blackie's or surf somewhere special or whatever, I'll take him. But I don't want to be the dad that's like, you gotta get up and surf. If he wants to, I support it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's really cool to be able to be really good in one sport, but it's also cool to be, well-rounded and be experienced in a lot of other things. And
Yeah.
I think, even though I was lucky to go surf, I did a lot of other things. I wasn't just die hard, 100% every day. Most of the time it did,
I
seem
mostly
like that, but-
remember you surfing, driving the squareback, and hanging out with girls.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yes, and yes.
Mostly, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
A lot of that. Squareback was badass, man. I wish I kept that thing.
What was the license plate on that?
HB surfing?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
I actually knew, but I just wanted you to tell the
yeah.
audience.
HB surfing. Yeah, that was a hand-me-down. It was epic. I couldn't go very far. I could get to lowers, but if I wanted to go hit Oceanside, it would usually overheat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need
So
to go
funny.
much more south than lowers. You're okay.
Oh, that's funny. Shit. I don't know. Do we have anything else?
Anything you wanna? Any words of last advice or?
No, I mean, you guys do this enough. Did it come across okay? Is there anything that I should have said that I didn't?
No, dude, you dropped some freaking amazing knowledge and experience and.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, people are fascinated on people's journey, especially in our industry that are, kind of privy of what goes on. But even people that are outside, and just I think our culture and our lifestyle is so intriguing, and it's how lucky are we to make money on something that we're freaking passionate about and stoked on. You know, it's not like going hitting numbers or going and doing this. It's like we're around cool shit all the time.
The crazy thing about Brizz, Blankinship is you have worked for two of the most iconic, successful brands. Three. Paul Frank is an outlier. You know what I mean? Like
4. That would be 4 because I'm looking at Ruka, looking at Quiksilver, Igloo.
Well,
Paul Frank.
Those are not authentic endemic surf brands. Ruka,
I know.
Holy crap! Like Ruka is still one of the best brands in the industry, and Quiksilver is a heritage brand, and you're helping like what you did at Igloo, like kind of made it cool again. You're helping Quiksilver with the help of other people. You're making Quiksilver a viable brand, right?
I hope it was rewarding. Like I said earlier, I really, in hindsight, I'm so proud of the Igloo thing because I didn't know it about myself, but I like fixing things. Fixing Igloo and getting it on the right track was really rewarding.
Let's change this. Brad, the fixer, Blankinship.
yeah, the handler.
The handler.
But yeah, I mean, like to when we talk about it again, and that list of brands and accomplishments with those brands, it's like, fuck, dude, you've done a lot of cool shit. You've done a lot of you've worn a lot of hats and executed on a lot of things in brands that we're like, that are, the biggest brands, and not just action sports, but also in the households. It's like, wow.
Yeah, congrats. Keep us in mind when you're at ground floor launching a new brand, because I have like $4 to invest, or I can do a lot of sweat equity.
Yeah, nice. I got sweat equity.
One thing we know how to do is work hard, and if it's juggling warehouse or printing or whatever.
And I think, like you guys said earlier, Mike Riley says it well. It's like the cultural connection matters. Out of VPs of sales I've worked with, Mike is great because the salty buyers love Mike.
Oh yeah,
because they could just talk the talk with him and relate with the guy, and he's totally authentic and really good at what he does. But I think it matters so much in this industry that you get endemic guys that know what they're doing, or can talk the talk. It matters a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I same as you guys. I just want the industry to be healthy and stable, and it's a although we all work our asses off, it's an amazing lifestyle. And I tell people every day, fuck, you could be selling insurance. You got it pretty good here.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I know a couple fucking really rich insurance companies. They got boats, and they're at their freaking travel a lot. Yeah. They're actually surfing a lot more than I am right now. But
good point.
No, but we get it.
Yeah.
Well, fucking Brad, thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story, man.
That was awesome.
It was amazing. Congrats.
You,
the president. Peace.